Beneath the dazzling skyline of New York City, the city that never sleeps, lies a shadowed history few dare to speak of. Streets that echo with laughter by day conceal whispers of secrets at night. Behind the rhythm of subway trains and the glow of neon lights, there exists another New York, a city of enigmas, unsolved mysteries, and unanswered questions. Some stories are buried deep in archives, others passed down in hushed conversations. Tales of vanished fortunes, unexplained disappearances, and strange events that defy logic. What really happened to the treasure said to be hidden beneath the city's cobblestones? Why do certain buildings hold reputations darker than their stone facades reveal? And what about the strange sightings that slip quietly into police reports, only to vanish just as suddenly? These are not just ghost stories. They are fragments of history, pieces of truth left dangling in uncertainty. So sit back, let the city lights fade, and join us as we dive into the most haunting, unsolved mysteries of New York City. On a humid August evening in 1930, the lights of New York City shimmered across Broadway like 1,000 fractured stars. Crowds swelled around theaters and cabarets. Car horns echoed through the haze, and the rhythm of the city pulsed with its usual restless urgency. Somewhere along West 45th Street, tucked between the buzzing marquees and smoke-filled restaurants, a man known as Joseph Force Crater, a respected judge of the New York Supreme Court, was last seen. He stepped into a taxicab, adjusted his jacket, and vanished into history. The story of Judge Crater is one of the most enduring mysteries in New York's long catalog of unsolved cases. He was not an ordinary man who could disappear without notice. At 41 years old, Crater was ambitious, wealthy, and politically connected. He moved comfortably in the circles of power, navigating the turbulent undercurrents of Tammany Hall politics, where influence often meant more than the law itself. His sudden vanishing on the night of August 6, 1930, sent shockwaves through the city and quickly earned him a haunting nickname in the press: the missingest man in New York. What makes this disappearance so compelling is not simply that a man went missing, but that this man, privileged, visible, and prominent, could seemingly dissolve into thin air in the heart of Manhattan. The facts, sparse though they are, form a puzzle that investigators, historians, and journalists have attempted to piece together for nearly a century. On that day, Judge Crater was spotted leaving his office, gathering documents, and withdrawing a large sum of cash from his bank, nearly $5,000, an amount equivalent to a small fortune during the Depression era. Witnesses reported he later dined at a popular steakhouse with friends, including a showgirl and a fellow lawyer. Afterward, he hailed a cab outside the restaurant. The driver pulled away, and from that moment forward, Crater ceased to exist in the public record. The search for him began quietly, but soon grew into a spectacle. His wife, Stella, away in Maine at the time, did not realize the gravity of his absence until days later. By then, rumors were already spreading. Had he run off with another woman? Had he been caught in the crossfire of New York's tangled web of corruption and organized crime? Or had he staged his own disappearance to escape debts, blackmail, or political fallout? Detectives scoured hotels, speakeasies, and even theaters rumored to be fronts for illicit dealings. They found little more than fragments. A briefcase of important papers was never located. His safety deposit box had been emptied before he vanished. Several women in his life, chorus girls, mistresses, companions, surfaced in newspaper stories, each adding layers of intrigue but no clarity. The mainstream explanations leaned toward scandal and crime. Crater was a man of influence during a time when New York's courts were entangled with the reach of mobsters and political bosses. Could his disappearance have been orchestrated to silence him? Was he caught up in a corrupt deal gone wrong? Some speculated he knew too much about Tammany Hall's darker dealings, and that his removal was both deliberate and convenient. Yet, more personal theories also emerged. He was known for his fondness for showgirls, and some wondered whether his ties to the city's nightlife had led him into dangerous company. One Broadway dancer claimed he had promised her gifts and financial support. Had a personal betrayal spiraled into something irreversible? The press delighted in these salacious connections, but none offered definitive answers. Decades later, in 2005, a new piece of the puzzle surfaced in the form of a handwritten note discovered among the belongings of a deceased woman in Queens. It suggested that Judge Crater had been murdered and buried beneath the boardwalk in Coney Island, his fate sealed by gangsters tied to political patrons. When excavations were carried out, however, no remains matching his description were ever identified. The note, like so many leads before it, faded into uncertainty. The case's endurance lies not only in the missing man himself, but in what his absence symbolizes. How could a judge, with connections to power, law enforcement, and wealth, vanish without leaving so much as a trace of certainty? If such a man could disappear, what does that say about the hidden mechanisms of the city he served? In the years following, the phrase, "to pull a crater," became shorthand for vanishing suddenly and inexplicably. It seeped into popular culture, a linguistic reminder that the city holds secrets it may never reveal. Each retelling, each new theory keeps the story alive, weaving it deeper into New York's mythic underworld of unsolved tales. And yet, perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not the absence of Judge Crater's body or belongings, but the silence that followed. Who, if anyone, had the power to erase a man so thoroughly from the map of history? Was it organized crime protecting its empire, political allies ensuring loyalty by fear, or the judge himself seeking an escape from the pressures of his double life? Standing today on West 45th Street, where the bright marquees still glow and the noise of Broadway fills the air, one can almost imagine the scene frozen in time. A man in a crisp suit, raising his hand for a taxi, the door closing with a thud. For a brief moment, he was visible. Then he was gone. The disappearance of Judge Joseph Crater remains a riddle written into the very fabric of New York. It is a story of power and vulnerability, of a city's brilliance masking its shadows. And it leaves us with a question that refuses to fade. In a city as vast, as crowded, and as alive as New York, how can a man simply vanish? What truths might still lie buried beneath its streets, waiting for discovery, or perhaps waiting to remain hidden forever? From the disappearance of Judge Crater, a man of stature swallowed by the city's shadows, we move back 2 decades earlier to a case that chilled New Yorkers in a different way. This time, it was not a political insider or a public figure. It was a young woman, an heiress, who seemed to have every advantage, and yet vanished on an ordinary winter afternoon in the very heart of Manhattan. It was December 12, 1910. The city was wrapped in a crisp, wintry air, Fifth Avenue bustling with carriages, automobiles, and shoppers making their way past elegant storefronts dressed in holiday finery. The sidewalks carried the fragrance of roasted chestnuts, the sound of bells, and the chatter of fashionable women in long coats and hats. Among them was Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold, 25 years old, the daughter of a wealthy perfume importer. Educated, refined, and a fixture in New York's social scene, Dorothy appeared to be the embodiment of privilege and promise. Yet by the end of that day, she would step into legend as one of the city's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Her morning had begun uneventfully. She left her family's townhouse on East 79th Street, dressed in a light blue coat and a matching hat, her demeanor as ordinary as any other errand she might run. She told her mother she was going shopping for an evening gown. By noon, she was seen entering Brentano's, a well-known bookstore on Fifth Avenue. She purchased a book, exchanged pleasantries, and walked back out into the wintry air. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. What makes Dorothy Arnold's disappearance so unnerving is how public it was. She did not vanish on a dark alleyway or in an isolated countryside. She was last seen on one of the busiest avenues of New York City, surrounded by people, on a bright December day. How does someone simply cease to exist under those circumstances? The Arnold family, cautious of scandal, did not immediately notify the police. Her father, Francis Arnold, a stern and wealthy businessman, feared publicity. Instead, the family discreetly searched for Dorothy among friends and acquaintances. Days passed with no word. Eventually, her absence could no longer be concealed. Newspapers across the country seized on the story, and Dorothy Arnold became a household name. Investigators scoured every lead. Some suspected she had eloped with a secret lover, perhaps slipping away under a veil of deception. Others whispered of despair. Dorothy had literary ambitions, having submitted short stories to magazines, only to face rejection. Could she have been overcome by shame, wandering into Central Park that day to take her own life? No evidence ever supported the theory, but it lingered nonetheless. More sinister possibilities soon emerged. Could Dorothy have been abducted? Fifth Avenue was safe in daylight, but the city held its darker corners. Rumors swirled of white slavery rings, shadowy groups said to lure young women into disappearance. Was she taken against her will, spirited away into a life from which she could never return? And then there were the reports, unverified but tantalizing, that she had been seen abroad. Sightings of a woman matching her description surfaced in Europe, Paris, Rome, and even small towns far from the glitter of Manhattan. Were these mere coincidences, or traces of a secret life Dorothy had chosen for herself? Her father dismissed such ideas angrily, insisting that no daughter of his could vanish without his knowing. His insistence, though firm, only fueled speculation further. Years passed, but the case never loosened its grip on the public imagination. Each decade brought a new rumor, a new theory. In 1914, a letter surfaced claiming Dorothy had died in a botched abortion at a doctor's home in New York, her body quietly disposed of to protect reputations. The theory, though never proven, reflected the social tensions of the time, the double standards and silence surrounding women's lives, choices, and the price of scandal in high society. Was Dorothy a victim not only of circumstance, but of the very culture she inhabited? Even Dorothy's family seemed divided. While her father maintained she had been murdered, others believed she had perhaps chosen exile, vanishing to escape the weight of expectation and privilege. Yet the absence of a body, the lack of definitive evidence, left every theory suspended in the realm of uncertainty. Standing today along Fifth Avenue, one can still feel the echoes of that winter afternoon. The grand shops have changed, but the avenue remains crowded with the hum of lives rushing past one another. It is almost impossible to imagine a young woman, wealthy, recognizable, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses, disappearing so completely in such a place. And yet, that is precisely what happened. What does Dorothy Arnold's vanishing tell us about the city itself? Was she undone by personal despair, taken by force into a hidden underworld, or quietly starting anew under a different name, in some place where her past could not follow? The case remains unsolved, suspended in a twilight between fact and speculation. It reminds us that even in the most public, familiar spaces, mysteries endure. For every corner lit by the city's brilliance, there are shadows waiting to swallow a story whole. And so we are left with a question that lingers more than a century later. On that cold December afternoon, where did Dorothy Arnold go? And what other secrets might New York still be keeping, hidden just beyond the reach of certainty? From the genteel avenues of Fifth Avenue and the strange vanishing of Dorothy Arnold, we now travel further back in time, into the early 19th century, when New York was a growing city of contrasts, elegant theaters beside dark alleys, polite society brushing shoulders with the underworld. It was here, along the quiet banks of the Hudson River, that the body of a young woman was discovered. Her name was Mary Cecilia Rogers, and her death would become one of the most infamous unsolved crimes of the era. It was the morning of July 28, 1841, when three men strolling near Sybil's Cave in Hoboken, New Jersey, noticed something floating in the water. Drawn closer, they realized it was the body of a young woman. She was well dressed, her hair carefully arranged, her features striking even in death. News spread quickly across the city. Mary Rogers, just 20 years old, had been found dead. Her body bore bruises and signs of a violent struggle. Within hours, the streets of Manhattan buzzed with rumor, speculation, and outrage. Mary Rogers was not an unknown figure. Quite the opposite. She was a minor celebrity of her day. She worked at Anderson's Tobacco Emporium on Broadway, a popular shop frequented by writers, politicians, and men of influence. Admirers flocked to the store not merely for cigars, but to catch a glimpse of Mary, known for her beauty and charm. Newspapers of the time occasionally mentioned her, transforming her into a symbol of youthful allure in the bustling city. Her sudden, violent end was therefore all the more shocking. The facts of the case at first seemed straightforward. Mary had told her mother she was visiting relatives, but she never arrived. Days later, her lifeless body was pulled from the river. Early reports suggested she had been strangled, perhaps assaulted, and then abandoned. Yet from the very beginning, the investigation was marred by confusion and contradiction. Some witnesses claimed they had seen Mary walking near Hoboken with men in the days before her disappearance. Others insisted she had enemies in the city, jealous women or predatory men who resented her fame. The police, lacking modern forensic tools and often influenced by political agendas, offered shifting theories but no answers. Even the handling of her body was chaotic. Her corpse placed on public display, drawing throngs of curious onlookers. The investigation soon descended into a blend of fact and spectacle, where rumor was treated as evidence and certainty slipped further from reach. Mainstream explanations at the time pointed toward foul play. Many believed Mary had been lured to Hoboken by acquaintances, perhaps under the pretense of a picnic or a meeting, only to be attacked. Others speculated she had been the victim of random violence, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as the weeks passed, the theories multiplied. Some newspapers suggested that Mary's death was linked to the so-called gangs of Hoboken, criminal groups who prowled the riverbanks and preyed on the unwary. Others whispered of a botched abortion, an idea rooted in the strict moral codes of the time, when unwanted pregnancies carried devastating social consequences. One doctor was even rumored to have been involved, though no charges were ever proven. Could Mary, a young woman under constant scrutiny, have sought secrecy and instead met tragedy? Adding to the intrigue was the involvement of the famous writer Edgar Allan Poe. Captivated by the case, Poe reimagined Mary's story in his tale The Mystery of Marie Roget, transplanting her death to Paris and weaving fiction with fact. His story mirrored the details of Mary's life and demise so closely that many readers saw it as a thinly veiled commentary on the failures of the investigation. Through literature, Mary Rogers became immortalized not just as a victim, but as a riddle for the ages. Speculation also swirled around her fiancé, Daniel Payne. Distraught after her death, Payne made a pilgrimage to the spot where her body was discovered. There, in the shadow of Sybil's Cave, he drank a vial of laudanum and died. His final act was widely seen as either a gesture of grief too heavy to bear, or, according to darker theories, a sign of hidden guilt. Was Payne mourning an irretrievable loss, or had he carried a secret about Mary's death to his grave? The decades that followed did little to bring clarity. Each new account contradicted the last. Some insisted she was a victim of urban vice, Others believed she was caught in the crossfire of affairs of the heart. Still others suggested her death revealed the vulnerability of women in a rapidly changing city, where beauty could bring both admiration and peril. The truth was swallowed, like her body, by the murky waters of the Hudson. Standing today at the site of Sybil's Cave, reconstructed as a relic of Hoboken's past, one can almost hear the echoes of that July day. The shocked cries of those who discovered her, the gasps of crowds drawn to her tragic story, the whispers of speculation carried across the river to New York. The cave itself, carved into stone and dripping with water, seems like a fitting symbol, dark, enigmatic, and silent about the truth it once concealed. The murder of Mary Rogers remains unsolved, and yet her story endures as more than just a tale of crime. It reflects the tensions of its time, a city torn between respectability and scandal, a society struggling with questions of morality, reputation, and justice. Who was Mary Rogers in her final moments? Was she betrayed by someone she trusted, taken by strangers, or the victim of a fate shaped by the social constraints of her era? Nearly 2 centuries later, the questions remain. Her name, once printed in bold headlines and whispered in drawing rooms, still lingers in the annals of mystery. And we are left to wonder, what secrets did the waters of the Hudson conceal that summer day in 1841? And how many more stories like hers lie hidden in the city's long, shadowed past, waiting to be unearthed or to remain forever untold? From the shadowed riverbanks of Hoboken and the tragic story of Mary Rogers, our journey through New York's enigmas brings us closer to our own time. The city has grown taller, louder, and more complex, but the presence of fear, the sense that something hidden lurks beneath its surface, has never disappeared. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, New Yorkers encountered a terror that seemed almost theatrical in its design. A gunman who styled himself after the infamous Zodiac killer of California. He left behind not only victims, but taunting notes, cryptic symbols, and a chilling uncertainty. He became known as the New York Zodiac. The backdrop was a city still struggling with crime. In the 1980s, New York was plagued by drug wars, rising homicide rates, and headlines that painted it as a city teetering on chaos. Against this turbulent landscape, the emergence of a figure invoking one of the most notorious killers in American history was almost too much to comprehend. It began with letters, typed notes sent to police and the media, filled with threats, demands, and references to the stars. The writer claimed to be guided by astrology, choosing his victims according to their zodiac signs. He signed his messages with ominous symbols, echoing the style of the original Zodiac who had terrorized California decades earlier. The first known attack came in November 1989. A man named Mario Orozco, walking home in Brooklyn, was shot, but survived. Days later, a letter arrived at the New York Post declaring responsibility and warning of further violence. The message referenced astrological signs, claiming that the attacks were not random but fated, written in the stars. Soon after, more shootings followed. Victims seemed to have little in common, different backgrounds, different lives, but each was linked, at least in the killer's telling, to the alignment of the Zodiac. What made the case even more unsettling was the combination of brutality and performance. The shooter not only targeted individuals, but seemed to craft a narrative around his crimes. He cast himself not merely as a murderer, but as a figure acting out a destiny, blending violence with symbolism. His notes referenced celestial charts, demanded media attention, and mocked investigators for their inability to stop him. New Yorkers who read the headlines saw in him a ghostly reflection of the California Zodiac, an imitator, yes, but also a reminder of how myth and terror can live on in imitation. For years, the case remained unsolved. Police struggled to connect the shootings definitively, as some seemed linked to the letters while others remained uncertain. Fear spread, though not with the same intensity as in California. In New York, crime was tragically common, yet this case stood out because of its theatricality. Why the stars? Why the symbols? Why this deliberate mirroring of an older, still unsolved killer? In 1996, an arrest finally came. A man named Heriberto Seda, living in a modest Brooklyn apartment, was charged after a domestic dispute brought him to police attention. Investigators discovered weapons, handwritten materials, and other items that tied him to the crimes. His fingerprints matched those on the Zodiac letters. Seda would eventually confess to a series of shootings spanning from 1990 to 1993, claiming he had acted under astrological guidance. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And yet, even with a conviction, questions remain. How many of the shootings attributed to the Zodiac were truly his, and how many were folded into the legend by coincidence? Did Seda invent the astrological framework after the fact to rationalize his crimes? Or was he genuinely convinced that the stars dictated his violence? Why imitate the Zodiac name at all? Was it an attempt at notoriety, or did he see himself as part of something larger, a continuation of an unresolved story? The case forces us to consider not just the killer, but the myth he chose to inhabit. The original Zodiac in California had never been caught, his ciphered letters and cryptic taunts leaving behind a vacuum of uncertainty. In invoking that name, Seda ensured his crimes would carry an echo, a resonance that stretched beyond the streets of Brooklyn and Queens. But it also raised uncomfortable questions. If terror can be imitated, does it ever truly end? The New York Zodiac killer is remembered today as both a murderer and a copycat, his crimes blending fact with imitation, violence with symbolism. Yet beneath the headlines, there remains an unsettling truth. Some aspects of his story still feel unfinished. His conviction tied him to a set of attacks, but whispers persist about other shootings in that era that remain unresolved, their connection to him never fully proven or disproven. Could there have been more than one person invoking the stars, more than one hand behind the terror? Standing now on the busy sidewalks of Brooklyn or along the crowded avenues of Queens, it is easy to forget that ordinary places once became the stage for something so chilling. A man with a gun, a cryptic letter sent to a newsroom, a symbol scrawled at the bottom of a page, all woven into the life of a city that has always lived in tension between its light and its shadows. The New York Zodiac story reminds us that mystery does not always come from absence, as with Dorothy Arnold or Judge Crater. Sometimes it comes from presence, the unsettling reality of a man who left evidence, who confessed, and who sits in prison, and yet whose story still refuses to close neatly. Did the stars truly guide him? Or was the Zodiac merely a mask for deeper, more human motives? And so we are left with a lingering unease. New York caught its Zodiac, but the questions did not end. They linger in the spaces between the stars and the streets, in the silence between fact and myth. And we are left to ask, how much of the truth do we really know, and how much remains hidden, still written in shadows, waiting to be revealed? From the coded letters of the New York Zodiac killer, we step further back in time, into the uneasy atmosphere of a city at war, though the United States had not yet officially entered it. It was the summer of 1916, and New York Harbor, alive with industry, commerce, and the restless energy of the modern world, became the stage for one of the most devastating explosions ever to strike American soil. An event so violent it shook windows in Times Square, cracked the torch of the Statue of Liberty, and left behind more questions than answers. This was the Black Tom explosion. On the night of July 30th, the Black Tom Munitions Depot, located on a small artificial island near Jersey City, was crowded with freight cars and barges loaded with explosives. Ammunition, dynamite, and shells destined for Allied forces in Europe were piled high. The war in Europe was raging, and though the United States had not yet joined the conflict, American industries supplied vast quantities of arms and equipment. Black Tom was one of the largest such stockpiles, a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came shortly after 2 a.m. It began with a low rumble, then a deafening roar. A fireball erupted into the night sky, followed by a chain reaction of explosions that rattled the ground for miles. The blast was so powerful that it registered as a measurable earthquake in Washington, D.C., more than 200 miles away. Shards of glass rained down across Manhattan. The Brooklyn Bridge trembled. People across the city awoke in terror, believing at first that the end of the world had come. In the harbor itself, chaos reigned. Barges were torn apart, freight cars reduced to splinters, and buildings across the river in Jersey City shook with the force of the blasts. The Statue of Liberty, standing less than a mile away, was not spared. The explosion bent and weakened the internal structure of her arm and torch, damage so severe that the torch has remained closed to the public ever since. Official reports listed only a handful of fatalities, perhaps 4 or 5, but hundreds were injured, and the property damage was catastrophic. The monetary cost in today's terms would exceed $2 billion. Yet beyond the destruction lay a deeper, more haunting question. Who was responsible? At first, the explanation seemed to lie in accident. With so much volatile material concentrated in one place, a careless spark, a dropped lantern, or even the summer heat might have been enough to ignite disaster. Investigators scoured the wreckage for signs of negligence, looking for proof that human error had caused the inferno. But almost immediately, suspicions turned elsewhere. The United States, though not yet a participant in World War I, was not neutral in practice. American factories supplied Britain, France, and Russia with weapons, munitions, and raw materials. Germany, facing these supplies on the battlefield, had every reason to stop them at their source. Was Black Tom not an accident, but an act of sabotage? Rumors spread that German agents had infiltrated the docks and rail yards, planting explosives or incendiary devices. In the climate of the time, such accusations carried weight. German espionage networks were active in the United States, operating under false identities, sometimes even under the cover of diplomatic missions. Could Black Tom have been their greatest success? In the years that followed, evidence did emerge pointing toward sabotage. Witnesses recalled suspicious men near the site in the hours before the explosion. Investigators uncovered fragments of devices that may have been incendiaries. And after the war, a wave of revelations about German spy activity across the U.S. lent further credence to the theory. In 1939, an international tribunal even held Germany responsible, ordering compensation for damages. But by then, decades had passed, witnesses had vanished, and certainty remained elusive. Still, not everyone agreed. Some historians argue that negligence or poor safety standards were just as likely. Munitions depots of the time were often chaotic, with minimal oversight and enormous quantities of explosives stored in dangerous proximity. Could the story of sabotage have been embraced not because of undeniable proof, but because it was easier to blame an enemy than to confront domestic failure? And then there are the more speculative theories. Some suggest the true scale of the explosion was exaggerated, that misinformation shaped the narrative for political gain. Others question the gaps in the record. Why were some witnesses silenced? Why were certain reports dismissed? Was the official story, whether accident or sabotage, crafted to fit political convenience, leaving the deeper truth buried under rubble and rumor? From the coded letters of the New York Zodiac killer, we step further back in time, into the uneasy atmosphere of a city at war, though the United States had not yet officially entered it. It was the summer of 1916, and New York Harbor, alive with industry, commerce, and the restless energy of the modern world, became the stage for one of the most devastating explosions ever to strike American soil. An event so violent it shook windows in Times Square, cracked the torch of the Statue of Liberty, and left behind more questions than answers. This was the Black Tom explosion. On the night of July 30th, the Black Tom Munitions Depot, located on a small artificial island near Jersey City, was crowded with freight cars and barges loaded with explosives. Ammunition, dynamite, and shells destined for Allied forces in Europe were piled high. The war in Europe was raging, and though the United States had not yet joined the conflict, American industries supplied vast quantities of arms and equipment. Black Tom was one of the largest such stockpiles, a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came shortly after 2 a.m. It began with a low rumble, then a deafening roar. A fireball erupted into the night sky, followed by a chain reaction of explosions that rattled the ground for miles. The blast was so powerful that it registered as a measurable earthquake in Washington, D.C., more than 200 miles away. Shards of glass rained down across Manhattan. The Brooklyn Bridge trembled. People across the city awoke in terror, believing at first that the end of the world had come. In the harbor itself, chaos reigned. Barges were torn apart, freight cars reduced to splinters, and buildings across the river in Jersey City shook with the force of the blasts. The Statue of Liberty, standing less than a mile away, was not spared. The explosion bent and weakened the internal structure of her arm and torch, damage so severe that the torch has remained closed to the public ever since. Official reports listed only a handful of fatalities, perhaps 4 or 5, but hundreds were injured, and the property damage was catastrophic. The monetary cost in today's terms would exceed $2 billion. Yet beyond the destruction lay a deeper, more haunting question. Who was responsible? At first, the explanation seemed to lie in accident. With so much volatile material concentrated in one place, a careless spark, a dropped lantern, or even the summer heat might have been enough to ignite disaster. Investigators scoured the wreckage for signs of negligence, looking for proof that human error had caused the inferno. But almost immediately, suspicions turned elsewhere. The United States, though not yet a participant in World War I, was not neutral in practice. American factories supplied Britain, France, and Russia with weapons, munitions, and raw materials. Germany, facing these supplies on the battlefield, had every reason to stop them at their source. Was Black Tom not an accident, but an act of sabotage? Rumors spread that German agents had infiltrated the docks and rail yards, planting explosives or incendiary devices. In the climate of the time, such accusations carried weight. German espionage networks were active in the United States, operating under false identities, sometimes even under the cover of diplomatic missions. Could Black Tom have been their greatest success? In the years that followed, evidence did emerge pointing toward sabotage. Witnesses recalled suspicious men near the site in the hours before the explosion. Investigators uncovered fragments of devices that may have been incendiaries. And after the war, a wave of revelations about German spy activity across the U.S. lent further credence to the theory. In 1939, an international tribunal even held Germany responsible, ordering compensation for damages. But by then, decades had passed, witnesses had vanished, and certainty remained elusive. Still, not everyone agreed. Some historians argue that negligence or poor safety standards were just as likely. Munitions depots of the time were often chaotic, with minimal oversight and enormous quantities of explosives stored in dangerous proximity. Could the story of sabotage have been embraced not because of undeniable proof, but because it was easier to blame an enemy than to confront domestic failure? And then there are the more speculative theories. Some suggest the true scale of the explosion was exaggerated, that misinformation shaped the narrative for political gain. Others question the gaps in the record. Why were some witnesses silenced? Why were certain reports dismissed? Was the official story, whether accident or sabotage, crafted to fit political convenience, leaving the deeper truth buried under rubble and rumor? From the roar of the Black Tom explosion, a force of destruction that scarred the skyline, we turn to a quieter, more insidious mystery. This one unfolded not in a single fiery instant, but slowly, invisibly, over years. It did not shatter windows or topple buildings, yet it struck terror into the hearts of New Yorkers all the same. For it revealed that danger could lurk in something as ordinary as a meal prepared in a wealthy household or a gathering around a dinner table. This is the mystery of Typhoid Mary. The story begins in the early years of the 20th century, when New York was a city of contrasts. Overcrowded tenements pressed against the opulent homes of Fifth Avenue, new immigrants arriving daily through Ellis Island, and sanitation struggling to keep pace with growth. Disease was never far from the city's streets. Cholera, smallpox, and tuberculosis haunted the poorer neighborhoods, where clean water and medical care were scarce. But the mystery of Typhoid Mary was different. It did not strike the impoverished slums. It infiltrated the homes of the wealthy. Mary Mallon was an Irish immigrant, arriving in New York in the 1880s. By the turn of the century, she had found steady work as a cook for affluent families. She was skilled, reliable, and in demand. Yet wherever she went, a strange pattern followed. Families that employed her soon found themselves stricken with typhoid fever, a disease marked by high fevers, abdominal pain, and sometimes death. The outbreaks puzzled doctors. Typhoid was usually linked to contaminated water supplies, not the kitchens of wealthy households. The mystery deepened in 1906 when a prominent family renting a summer home in Oyster Bay suddenly fell ill. Out of 11 people in the house, 6 contracted typhoid. Their water source tested clean, their servants were healthy, and yet the illness spread through their ranks. An investigator named George Soper was called in. His work would unravel a chilling thread. In case after case, the outbreaks followed one woman, Mary Mallon. But here was the confounding detail. Mary herself showed no symptoms. She was strong, healthy, and seemingly untouched by the disease she left in her wake. How could a person carry typhoid without succumbing to it? The idea was almost inconceivable at the time. Yet as Soper traced her history, the evidence mounted. At least 7 outbreaks, dozens of infections, and multiple deaths could be linked to Mary's employment as a cook. Confronted, Mary denied everything. She refused to believe she could be the source of illness. Her resistance was understandable. To accept the accusation was to accept a role as both victim and villain. She had no medical training, no understanding of asymptomatic carriers, and she felt she was being persecuted for crimes she had never intended. When authorities attempted to test her, she fled. But in 1907, she was captured and sent to quarantine on North Brother Island, a small spit of land in the East River that functioned as an isolation site for the sick. For 3 years, she remained there, confined but healthy. Doctors pressed her to give up cooking, to find another line of work, but Mary refused. Cooking was her livelihood, her identity, her craft. In 1910, she was released on the condition that she never work as a cook again. Yet, within a few years, under aliases and secrecy, she returned to her old profession, and the outbreaks resumed. By 1915, after another cluster of infections, this time in a hospital where she had taken work under a false name, Mary was again seized and sent back to North Brother Island. This time, she would remain there for the rest of her life. She died in 1938, after more than 2 decades in isolation. The mystery of typhoid. Mary lingers not only in the question of how many outbreaks she truly caused, but in the broader implications of her story. Was Mary a criminal, recklessly endangering others, or a tragic figure caught in the gap between medical ignorance and public fear? Could she have chosen differently if she had been treated with more compassion, given alternatives, or helped to understand her condition? Or was she doomed by circumstance, an immigrant woman in a city quick to find scapegoats? Science eventually confirmed what was once unimaginable, that asymptomatic carriers of typhoid could spread the disease unknowingly. Mary Mallon was the first such case identified in the United States, but she was not the last. Yet hers became a cautionary tale, magnified by the press into legend. The very name Typhoid Mary entered popular language, applied to anyone seen as a hidden source of harm. But behind the phrase was a real woman, her life shaped and ultimately consumed by forces beyond her control. Standing today on the shores of North Brother Island, long abandoned and overgrown, one can almost imagine her presence lingering. The crumbling ruins of the quarantine hospital, swallowed by vines, echo with silence. It is a place that once held hundreds of the sick and dying, but it is Mary's story that continues to haunt it most. She lived and died in enforced solitude, remembered less for who she was than for the mystery of what she carried. The case of Typhoid Mary remains unresolved in its meaning. Was she truly responsible for dozens of deaths? Or was her infamy exaggerated by fear and sensational headlines? Did she deserve her fate? Or was she the victim of a society that needed a face to put to an invisible threat? Over a century later, the questions persist. Her story reminds us that danger does not always come with warning, that sometimes the greatest threats are invisible, moving quietly from hand to hand, meal to meal. And it leaves us with a haunting reflection. In a city as vast and crowded as New York, how many mysteries of disease, contagion, and human fate remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered, or left forever untold? From the unseen dangers of contagion in the case of Typhoid Mary, we now step into a very different kind of enigma, one that unfolded not in hospitals or quarantine islands, but on the bustling streets of New York, where the promise of wealth and the shadow of crime have always walked side by side. It is the story of an armored truck that vanished, carrying with it millions of dollars, and leaving behind one of the most perplexing financial mysteries in the city's history. Picture the armored truck, steel-plated, heavy, and seemingly impenetrable. For decades, these vehicles have been the silent workhorses of the financial world, ferrying cash and securities between banks, businesses, and Federal Reserve vaults. To the average passerby, they are symbols of security, hulking, watchful, unyielding. But one day in New York, that symbol itself became the mystery. The date was August 1980, when a Brinks truck left its scheduled stop in Manhattan, carrying what reports estimated to be between $1.5 and $3 million in cash and checks. Its mission was routine. Its route was known. And yet, somewhere between departure and destination, it disappeared. Hours later, when no arrival was logged, alarm spread quickly through the banking world. A search was launched, but no trace of the vehicle or its cargo could be found. In a city where crime was rampant, the scale of the heist was breathtaking. Armored trucks had been targeted before, sometimes by violent robbery, sometimes by inside conspiracies. But to lose an entire truck, with guards, steel walls, and millions in currency, was almost unthinkable. How could such a thing happen without leaving behind obvious signs of theft or violence? The first explanations were straightforward. Investigators suspected an inside job. Could the guards themselves have diverted the vehicle, vanishing into the underground economy of New York with a fortune that could be laundered, hidden, or smuggled abroad. Suspicion fell on employees with access to schedules and routes. Interrogations were carried out, but no definitive proof ever surfaced. Others pointed to organized crime. The 1980s were a decade when New York's mafia families still wielded enormous influence, controlling unions, construction, and often the financial shadows of the city. Could the missing Brinks millions have been a mob operation, carefully planned, executed with precision, and then absorbed into the labyrinthine accounts of illicit businesses? Some investigators leaned toward this theory, especially given the absence of violence. If the guards themselves were complicit or coerced, the truck could vanish quietly. But the strangeness of the case only deepened as time went on. Normally, stolen cash appears eventually, resurfacing in small fragments, counterfeit bills traced back to a single batch, deposits that raise suspicion, whispers among criminals. Yet the Brinks money seemed to dissolve completely. No one came forward with credible claims, no bills were traced, and no reliable witnesses placed the truck anywhere beyond its scheduled route. It was as if steel and currency had both evaporated into the city air. Speculative theories soon filled the vacuum. Some suggested that the truck was driven straight to the docks, its cargo offloaded into containers bound for overseas, never to return. Others wondered if the truck itself was dismantled in one of the city's many industrial warehouses, cut apart and scattered before anyone realized it was gone. More far-fetched whispers suggested political motivations. Funds diverted for covert operations, covered up under layers of bureaucracy and silence. The press, fascinated by the audacity of the disappearance, fueled the mystery further. Headlines asked how a vehicle of that size could disappear in a city so dense, so crowded, and so policed. Was the money buried in basements beneath Brooklyn? Hidden in safety deposit boxes under false names? Or had it simply been spent, quietly, over years, until the millions were diffused into the economy beyond recovery? The absence of resolution ensured the case lived on. Unlike many robberies where suspects are caught or loot is recovered, the missing Brinks millions became an unsolved chapter in New York's financial history. Each retelling carried the same haunting refrain. Millions in cash, guarded by steel, vanished without a trace. What makes the story particularly mysterious is the contrast it embodies. An armored truck is designed as the antithesis of disappearance. Its very existence is a promise of security, visibility, and accountability. And yet here, security itself became fragile. The fortress on wheels undone not by brute force, but by silence and invisibility. Standing today in Manhattan, among the swirl of traffic, delivery vans, and armored trucks that still weave through the city, one cannot help but wonder, what became of that vehicle? Did it roll quietly into a warehouse never to emerge, its cargo parceled out in secret? Or does it lie in fragments, buried somewhere in New York's industrial underbelly, its millions long since dispersed? The mystery remains, unsolved and unsettling. For if an armored truck, a symbol of certainty, can vanish in the daylight of New York City, what else might disappear, unseen, in the restless life of this metropolis? And so the question lingers. Was the Brinks truck a victim of cunning criminals, inside betrayal, or something even deeper, hidden beneath layers of secrecy? Whatever the truth, it lies somewhere out there, in the shadows of a city that guards its secrets well. From the vanished millions of a missing Brinks armored truck, we turn from the world of money above ground to a mystery hidden deep below the surface. For while the city's wealth and commerce move across its avenues, an entirely different legend whispers beneath its foundations. An underground world said to be inhabited by the so-called mole people. Imagine descending into the tunnels of New York's subway system long after the last train has passed. The platforms echo with silence. Fluorescent lights flicker, and the air grows thick with the scent of rust, damp concrete, and forgotten machinery. Beyond the reach of commuters lies an immense network. Miles upon miles of abandoned stations, sealed passageways, and disused maintenance corridors. These spaces, dark and uncharted, have given birth to one of New York's most enduring modern legends. The idea of the Mole People first gained wide attention in the late 20th century, when journalists and writers began documenting accounts of homeless individuals living in the city's subterranean spaces. The 1993 book, The Mole People: Life in the Tunnels Beneath New York City, by Jennifer Toth, popularized the notion of vast underground communities, entire societies, hidden away from the surface world. According to the accounts, some of these communities numbered in the hundreds, complete with makeshift homes, electricity tapped from subway lines, and even social hierarchies. But how much of this was truth, and how much was myth? On one level, the reality of underground living is undeniable. For decades, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, New York's homeless population sought shelter in the tunnels. Away from the dangers of the streets, the subway system offered darkness, relative warmth, and a kind of invisibility. Outreach workers, police, and journalists all documented encounters with people living in these hidden spaces. The existence of tunnel dwellers was not in doubt. Yet the legend of the Mole People goes far beyond this reality. Stories spread of communities stretching deep into abandoned lines, where entire families lived for generations without surfacing. Some tales described children born and raised in darkness, never seeing the sun. Others spoke of self-governed societies with rules, leadership, and rituals, surviving like modern-day echoes of ancient civilizations hidden beneath the city. Skeptics pointed out the inconsistencies. Journalists who ventured underground often found small groups, not sprawling societies. Many of the more extreme claims in books and articles could not be verified. Anthropologists and urban explorers argued that the legend had been exaggerated by the press, blending fact with sensationalism. Still, the mystery persisted. If only fragments of these stories were true, what more might remain hidden in the city's labyrinth of tunnels? The intrigue deepened when official records revealed just how vast New York's underground truly is. Beyond the operating subway lines are forgotten stations like City Hall, closed to the public but still haunting in their elegance. Old service tunnels run for miles, some mapped, others sealed and forgotten. Maintenance workers tell stories of hearing voices echoing from passages thought to be empty. Could these be remnants of hidden communities, or merely the tricks of sound in an underground maze? Speculative theories flourished. Some suggested the Mole People represented an underground culture deliberately separated from society, choosing self-exile rather than enduring life above. Others proposed that the stories of shadowy tunnel dwellers tapped into older urban fears. The idea that beneath every great city lies a mirror world of the dispossessed, unseen but ever present. A few even connected the legend to conspiracy theories, that government agencies tolerated or even monitored subterranean communities for reasons never disclosed. The line between reality and mythology blurred further when popular culture embraced the legend. Documentaries, novels, and films depicted the Mole People as everything from tragic outcasts to near mythical beings adapted to darkness. The imagery was powerful, an entire city beneath the city, hidden in plain sight, surviving in ways the surface world could scarcely imagine. But what do we truly know? Outreach organizations confirm that small numbers of people still live in the tunnels, though far fewer today than in decades past. Their existence is real, their struggles tangible. Yet the grander claims, the 100-strong societies, the multi-generational communities, remain unverified. lingering in the realm of rumor and urban myth. Walking the platforms of abandoned stations today, one cannot help but feel the weight of the mystery. The silence in these spaces is heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of trains. Graffiti covers the walls, remnants of forgotten lives and stories. Did someone once call this place home? Did a hidden community once flourish here, invisible to the millions above? Or are we projecting our own fascination with the unknown onto the darkness, turning hardship into legend? The legend of the Mole People endures not because it has been proven, but because it captures something essential about New York itself. A city of layers, of contradictions, of wealth and poverty stacked side by side. It seems only natural to imagine that below its shining skyline lies a hidden counterpart, a world unseen. And so the questions linger. Were the Mole People truly vast underground societies, surviving in the shadows of one of the world's busiest cities? Or were they smaller groups, their existence magnified into myth by storytellers hungry for intrigue? The answers remain buried in the tunnels themselves, dark, silent, and largely unexplored. And we are left to wonder how much of New York's true story lies not in its skyscrapers above, but in the shadows beneath our feet. From the dim tunnels where legends of the Mole People linger, we rise once again to the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Towers of steel and glass gleam in the sunlight, symbols of immense power and wealth. Few names are more bound to that legacy than Rockefeller, a family synonymous with industry, oil, philanthropy, and fortune. But woven into the myth of their empire is a curious, little-known enigma, the so-called Rockefeller Treasure Map. The story begins not in the grandeur of Rockefeller Center, but with a strange artifact. In the early 20th century, whispers circulated of a hand-drawn map connected in some way to the Rockefellers. The map depicted portions of New York, marked with unusual symbols, X's, arrows, and coded notations. At first glance, it resembled any old surveyor's sketch. But to those who studied it, the implications seemed far stranger. Was this an elaborate hoax, a forgotten family document, or a guide to hidden wealth buried beneath the streets of the city? The Rockefeller family, of course, needs no introduction. John D. Rockefeller Sr., founder of Standard Oil, was the wealthiest man of his age, his fortune reshaping not just New York, but the entire American economy. His descendants expanded into banking, real estate, and philanthropy, their name etched into the foundations of museums, parks, and universities. But the very scale of their fortune sparked speculation. Could all of it be accounted for in ledgers and trusts? Or was some of it deliberately hidden, safeguarded in ways only a cryptic map might reveal? The first reports of the treasure map surfaced in newspaper gossip columns and later in fringe history publications. According to one version, the map was discovered among the effects of a Rockefeller associate, a man involved in real estate transactions during the early development of Manhattan. Another story claimed it was tucked inside a rare book auctioned in the 1920s, bought quietly by a collector who later spoke of its peculiar markings. No matter the origin, the theme was the same. The map seemed to point to something concealed beneath New York. Mainstream explanations dismissed the tale. Perhaps it was simply a surveyor's draft related to Rockefeller-owned properties. The strange symbols, they argued, could have been shorthand notations, meaningless to outsiders, but practical to those in the business of carving up lots and parcels. In a city constantly being rebuilt, buried vaults and sealed foundations are common. Was the so-called treasure map nothing more than an ordinary piece of paperwork inflated into mystery by its association with a famous name? But others saw more. The map's markings often corresponded to locations near the Hudson River, old warehouses, or even areas tied to the Revolutionary War. Speculators wondered if Rockefeller or his associates had deliberately hidden assets during periods of political and financial uncertainty, gold, bonds, or artifacts locked away beneath the earth. After all, the Rockefellers operated in an era when fortunes were guarded not only by banks, but by secrecy and private vaults. Could the map then be a clue to caches of wealth hidden long before modern regulation? Over time, the legend only grew. Amateur treasure hunters pored over old city blueprints, trying to match the markings. Some claimed to find evidence of sealed tunnels beneath lower Manhattan, bricked-up passageways leading nowhere. Others drew connections between the map and older stories of pirate treasure buried along the Hudson, speculating that perhaps Rockefeller had acquired more than just oil fields in his rise to dominance. Was it possible that the treasure marked on the map was not his, but something he stumbled upon, safeguarded under his watch? Theories reached further still. Some fringe accounts suggested that the map was linked not to money at all, but to knowledge, an encoded guide to locations of hidden documents or lost archives. New York, after all, has seen centuries of upheaval. Colonial forts, revolutionary skirmishes, fires, and waves of rebuilding. Countless records have vanished, buried beneath foundations. Could the Rockefeller map have been a tool to preserve a secret history, one known only to the powerful? Critics argue that no solid evidence has ever surfaced. No authenticated Rockefeller document resembling a treasure map has been placed in archives. The stories of its discovery remain contradictory, yet absence of proof has only deepened fascination. Why, some ask, does the legend persist so stubbornly? Is it because New York is a city built on hidden layers, literally and figuratively? Or because the Rockefeller name itself embodies the tension between immense wealth and the mysteries of how it was built? Standing today in Rockefeller Center, one is surrounded by polished stone, golden murals, and the famous ice rink, symbols of visible prosperity. Yet beneath these towers lie networks of basements, vaults, and tunnels. Tourists glide above on skates while, far below, sealed doors and forgotten chambers lie silent. Is it truly so implausible that among these subterranean spaces, something could be hidden still? The Rockefeller Treasure Map remains an enigma balanced between fact and folklore. It may have been nothing more than a real estate sketch inflated by imagination, or it may hint at hidden wealth deliberately obscured from history. Whatever the case, it persists as part of New York's tapestry of mystery, a reminder that even the wealthiest and most powerful families carry shadows in their legacy. And so, the question lingers. Was the Rockefeller Treasure Map ever real? And if so, what did it truly conceal? Gold, forgotten documents, or simply the allure of a name tied forever to secrecy and fortune? The answer lies buried somewhere beneath the city, whether in stone, in archives, or in imagination. From whispered rumors of hidden wealth and cryptic maps tied to the Rockefellers, our attention now turns to a mystery not of treasure, but of passage. It lies in the heart of New York's green sanctuary, Central Park. Beneath its winding paths, towering elms, and rolling meadows, there are stories of something unseen. A lost tunnel sealed away, its purpose and origin never fully explained. Central Park is a landscape shaped by design, yet steeped in myth. Created in the mid-19th century by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, it was conceived as both a refuge from the chaos of Manhattan and a feat of engineering. Beneath its pastoral surface lies a hidden skeleton of infrastructure: sewer lines, service tunnels, reservoirs, and passages built to keep the mechanics of the park invisible to visitors. But amid this hidden world, legends of a lost tunnel have persisted for more than a century. The first accounts emerged in the late 1800s, when workers claimed to have stumbled upon a sealed passageway while repairing drainage lines. According to these stories, the tunnel extended deep beneath the park, its stone walls carefully constructed, its purpose unclear. Some said it led to an underground chamber. Others believed it once connected to military structures predating the park, remnants of New York's Revolutionary War defenses. A few insisted it stretched all the way to the Hudson River. As Central Park aged, reports of hidden entrances fueled speculation. A bricked arch half buried near the Ramble, a gated passage near the Arsenal building. Service workers whispered of padlocked doors and rock faces, disguised as natural features. Were these merely utility access points, or clues to something more? Mainstream explanations suggest that the lost tunnel was likely part of the park's elaborate service system. Olmsted and Vaux were meticulous in concealing the infrastructure that kept the park running. They built sunken roadways, bridges, and culverts so that carriages, workers, and maintenance could move unseen. A tunnel, if it existed, might have been designed for such practical purposes, later sealed and forgotten as the park evolved. But the theories did not stop there. Some believed the tunnel predated the park altogether. Before Central Park's construction, the land was home to settlements, farms, and even Seneca Village, a community of free black residents and immigrants that was destroyed to make way for the park. Could the tunnel have been part of an older structure? Perhaps a cellar, a military storehouse, or even a secret escape route built in a time of conflict? Others pushed the mystery into more speculative territory. Treasure hunters linked it to Revolutionary War legends, suggesting that caches of British or American gold were hidden in secret tunnels during the chaos of battle. The idea dovetailed with broader myths of buried treasure across Manhattan, fueling decades of urban exploration. Still others drew connections to Prohibition, imagining the tunnel as a smuggling route used by bootleggers in the 1920s, when speakeasies thrived and hidden passageways were part of survival. The most curious stories, however, came from park visitors themselves. In the 20th century, children claimed to find strange iron doors half buried in hillsides, locked and rusted. Joggers spoke of hearing hollow echoes beneath their feet in certain parts of the park, as if running above empty chambers. Urban explorers reported finding walled-up archways, their stones mismatched from surrounding masonry, as if they concealed something that was not meant to be reopened. No official records confirm the existence of a grand hidden tunnel, but Central Park is filled with enough mystery to keep the story alive. Its sheer size, 843 acres, offers ample opportunity for forgotten corners, sealed spaces, and abandoned works. And because the park has always been so carefully curated, anything hidden beneath its surface takes on an air of intentional secrecy. The fascination lies not just in whether the tunnel exists, but in why it would have been concealed. If it was a simple utility passage, why not maintain it or repurpose it? If it belonged to an older structure, why erase it from the record? And if it were something more, something of strategic, financial, or even symbolic value, what could still be down there, locked away beneath the footsteps of millions of visitors each year? Today, when one stands in Central Park's Ramble or near the shadow of Belvedere Castle, it is tempting to look more closely at the stonework, to search for irregular seams or unnatural archways. The park feels tranquil, but beneath its quiet ponds and grassy fields lies a dense web of infrastructure, much of it unseen. Could the lost tunnel still be there, sealed behind brick, waiting in the dark? The legend of the Central Park Lost Tunnel reminds us of the city's layered nature. New York is a place of constant construction and reinvention, where each new age builds upon the foundations of the last. In such a city, it is inevitable that some things are forgotten, buried, bricked up, or deliberately concealed. The tunnel may never be rediscovered, or perhaps it already has been, its secret quietly folded into official silence. And so, as we walk the paths of Central Park today, among the joggers, picnickers, and tourists, we are left to wonder how much of the park's story lies not in its visible beauty, but in its hidden depths, What passageways might still twist beneath the soil, silent and sealed, guarding secrets that have yet to be uncovered or that were meant never to be revealed? From the whispers of sealed stonework beneath Central Park, where tunnels may lie forgotten in the dark, we turn our eyes outward to the waters. For as much as New York is a city of streets and towers, it is also a city of rivers, a place where the Hudson flows endlessly past the skyline, carrying commerce, history, and at times, mystery. Among its strangest tales is that of a vessel seen drifting silently along its currents, a ship without crew or captain, known in whispers as the ghost ship of the Hudson. The Hudson River has long been a stage for mystery. In the 18th and 19th centuries, sailors spoke of phantom lights moving across its surface, strange fogs that concealed vessels until they vanished again, and echoes of voices that carried on still water. But the legend of the ghost ship is one of its most enduring stories. Witnesses described a full-rigged ship, pale and silent, gliding along the river as if untouched by wind or tide. Its sails, some said, were tattered, yet it moved with eerie grace. And, most unsettling of all, its deck was always empty. Accounts of the ship vary, but some trace its origins to the early 1600s, during Henry Hudson's famous voyage along the river that would later bear his name. Hudson's journey was marked by conflict, hardship, and eventual mutiny. In certain retellings, the ghost ship is said to be the spectral echo of his vessel, the Halve Mon, cursed to sail forever as penance for the crew's betrayal and Hudson's tragic fate. Could the shimmering image seen by later generations have been a memory etched into the waters themselves, a vision repeating across time? Others root the story in more tangible history. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, the Hudson bustled with trade, ferries, and steamships. Storms were frequent, accidents common. Ships sank in sudden squalls or burned in catastrophic fires. Survivors were sometimes few, and wreckage often scattered downstream. Could the ghost ship be the lingering image of one such vessel, lost so suddenly that its presence still haunts the river? Mainstream explanations lean toward misinterpretation. On foggy nights, the Hudson can play tricks on the eye. Lights from passing ships or shorelines reflect strangely, giving the illusion of vessels that aren't there. Temperature inversions can create mirages, bending light so that distant ships appear ghostly and floating above the water. To a startled observer, a trick of optics could become a phantom vessel. Yet, the reports persist, and they share curious similarities. The ship is often described as silent, its sails faintly glowing, its form visible for only moments before fading into mist. Some say it appears before storms, as if heralding disaster. Others tell of boatmen who tried to follow it, only to find themselves stranded in fog, their compasses faltering, the phantom gone. In the 19th century, the story of the ghost ship was sometimes tied to omens of death. Newspapers reported instances where families along the river claimed to see the phantom vessel shortly before the death of a loved one. Was it coincidence, or had the legend become a kind of collective symbol, a way for communities to interpret grief through the language of myth? Speculative theories, as always, have flourished. Some believe the ghost ship is not tied to any single vessel, but to the river itself, a manifestation of centuries of loss, a symbol of all the ships and souls claimed by its waters. Others suggest it could be a case of stone tape theory, the idea that traumatic events imprint themselves on the environment, replaying under the right conditions like echoes from the past. Still others push into stranger territory. Could the ghost ship be a glimpse into another time, a fragment of history bleeding into the present? Standing today on the Hudson's edge, whether in Manhattan, Hoboken, or the Palisades, one sees a busy river filled with ferries, barges, and gleaming yachts. Yet, in the quiet moments, At dusk, in mist, when the water glows with the reflection of the city's lights, it is not difficult to imagine something older drifting into view. A pale hull, a mast without a crew, a vessel gliding against the current without explanation. The legend of the ghost ship of the Hudson endures because it speaks to a deeper truth about the city itself. New York thrives on constant movement, ships arriving, trains departing, towers rising. But its history is layered with absence, with lives and stories lost to time. The ghost ship is a reminder of those absences, a symbol of the unseen beneath the surface of the city's progress. And so the question remains, was the ghost ship a trick of light, a sailor's tale born of fear and fog, or is there something more, an imprint of history that refuses to fade, a phantom vessel still sailing the waters it once knew? We may never know for certain, but as the Hudson flows past the city, carrying with it reflections of skyscrapers and sunsets, one cannot help but glance at the water's surface and wonder, what if, just for a moment, the river chose to reveal its secrets? And what else might still drift, unseen, along the forgotten currents of New York's past? From the silent vessel said to drift along the Hudson River, we move now to a very different kind of apparition. One that did not sail across the water but streaked across the sky. If the ghost ship belongs to the realm of maritime legend, the next mystery belongs to the heavens themselves. For in moments when New York was plunged into darkness, some say strange lights appeared above, unexplained and unsettling. These are the tales of the Blackout UFOs. Few events unsettle a city more than a sudden blackout. The hum of machines dies, the glow of neon vanishes, and the rhythm of modern life grinds to a halt. In New York, a city that thrives on constant movement, blackouts are more than inconvenience. They are transformative moments, plunging millions into an eerie stillness. And in those moments of darkness, when the sky grows strangely visible above the skyline, reports of unusual phenomena have a way of surfacing. The most famous blackout struck on November 9, 1965. At 5:27 p.m., a massive power failure cascaded across the Northeast, leaving over 30 million people without electricity. In New York City, subways froze in their tunnels, skyscrapers went dark, and people poured into the streets under a strangely silent sky. Amid the chaos, reports began to emerge of unidentified flying objects. Strange lights moving with unusual precision, appearing above the city and the Hudson River. Witnesses described glowing orbs, sometimes in formation, hovering silently before darting away at impossible speeds. Airline pilots flying near the city claimed to have seen lights maneuvering against known flight patterns. Radar operators reported anomalies. For many, the coincidence was too striking to ignore, a massive blackout coinciding with unexplained aerial phenomena. Was it mere chance, or was there a connection between the two? Mainstream explanations leaned toward caution. Power officials pointed to a technical fault near Ontario, Canada, as the cause of the blackout. The sudden absence of city lights made the night sky far clearer than usual, revealing stars and satellites that many New Yorkers had never seen. Could the UFO sightings have been misinterpretations? Venus, aircraft lights, or satellites mistaken for something otherworldly? But not everyone was convinced. Some investigators, particularly within the burgeoning UFO research community of the 1960s, suggested a more intriguing possibility. Could the blackout itself have been triggered, or at least accompanied, by the presence of unknown craft? If electromagnetic interference was involved, might the lights in the sky have played some role in the failure? The pattern seemed to repeat. During the July 13, 1977 blackout, which left New York in darkness once again, similar reports surfaced. As looters filled the streets below, others looked up and claimed to see unusual lights hovering above the powerless city. The accounts varied. Some spoke of glowing discs, others of clusters of lights, But the theme remained the same: blackouts, darkness, and unidentified objects above. Speculative theories have flourished ever since. Some suggest that the blackout UFOs were merely coincidence, sightings magnified by fear, darkness, and the unusual visibility of the night sky. Others argue that the UFOs were drawn to the blackouts, perhaps attracted by the sudden electromagnetic disturbances of a failing power grid. A few even speculate that the objects caused the blackouts deliberately, tests of technology, warnings, or demonstrations of control. The U.S. government, for its part, has always maintained that the blackouts had mundane causes: technical failures, overloaded grids, or lightning strikes. And yet, official reports rarely address the UFO sightings directly, leaving a silence that many find just as mysterious as the lights themselves. Eyewitness accounts remain some of the most compelling elements of the story. Ordinary citizens, police officers, pilots, and utility workers described lights unlike any they had seen before. Some accounts mentioned the objects moving against the wind. Others noted their sudden accelerations. A few even claimed the lights seemed to linger directly above power facilities before vanishing. Could so many accounts be dismissed as misperceptions, or do they point to something more tangible, more elusive? The blackout UFO mystery captures attention because it brings together two fears: our dependence on fragile infrastructure and the possibility of forces beyond our understanding. A city without light is already vulnerable, stripped of its defenses. To add the presence of unknown lights in the sky is to suggest that in those moments of darkness, New York was not only powerless but watched. Standing today in Times Square, bathed in neon and LED screens, it is almost impossible to imagine the city in silence and darkness. And yet, in those rare moments when the power fails and the stars return to view, the old questions come rushing back. Were those blackout UFOs nothing more than tricks of perception in unusual conditions? Or were they glimpses of something beyond our grasp, appearing in the sky at the very moment our lights failed below? The mystery remains unsolved, suspended between coincidence and cosmic intrigue. And we are left to wonder, in those hours when the city lay dark and still, what truly passed above New York's skyline? Were the blackout UFOs illusions born of fear and starlight, or evidence of something watching from beyond, choosing those moments when humanity's lights went out to make itself known? From the skies above, a city plunged into darkness, where mysterious lights once shimmered during blackouts. We descend now into the earth beneath New York, for if the heavens have their enigmas, so too do the tunnels. The subway is the city's hidden circulatory system, carrying millions each day through its arteries of steel and stone. But along these tracks, in forgotten stations and shadowed corridors, there are whispers of something uncanny. Trains that appear without schedule, that glide past in silence, that vanish as suddenly as they arrive. These are the tales of the phantom subway trains. Step down into the subway late at night, and the atmosphere changes. The rush hour crowds are gone, leaving tiled platforms echoing with distant drips and the low rumble of unseen machinery. The fluorescent lights flicker. Air rushes through the tunnels as if heralding something unseen. For generations, riders and workers alike have spoken of trains that should not be there. Ghostly cars glimpsed in the distance, or entire trains that appear, doors closed, their windows dark, before vanishing back into the tunnels. The most famous stories center around abandoned stations. City Hall Station, with its vaulted ceilings and ornate tiling, closed in 1945, is often cited. Workers have claimed to see trains roll slowly through, their cars unfamiliar, their interiors unlit. Was it a rerouted maintenance train, or something stranger? At the decommissioned Worth Street Station, explorers have told of hearing the clatter of wheels on rails, yet no train ever comes. Historically, there are plenty of explanations for such encounters. The New York subway system, first opened in 1904, is vast and layered with forgotten infrastructure. Entire stations have been sealed off, service lines rerouted, and tunnels abandoned. Maintenance trains often run at odd hours, and their unfamiliar appearance can easily startle late-night riders. Light and sound play tricks underground. An echo bouncing through steel corridors can mimic the approach of a train that never arrives. Yet the reports often go beyond the rational. Riders have described seeing trains that seem decades out of place. Cars with designs no longer in use, advertising posters for events long past, even operators dressed in uniforms of another era. Witnesses claim the trains glide past without slowing, the faces inside pale and expressionless, or the windows completely empty. Some swear the trains make no sound at all, only to vanish into a tunnel that official maps say leads nowhere. Speculative theories abound. Some suggest these are not ghosts at all, but optical illusions created by reflections or misinterpretations of service vehicles. Others lean into the supernatural, imagining the phantom trains as echoes of the past, spectral replays of accidents, disasters, or forgotten journeys. After all, the subway has seen its share of tragedy, fires, crashes, and untold deaths during construction. Could the tunnels themselves carry imprints of these moments, replayed in flickering glimpses of trains that no longer exist? There are even tales of phantom trains acting as omens. Workers have whispered that seeing one foretells danger, an accident on the tracks, or misfortune for those who ride the system daily. In some accounts, passengers who boarded such trains were never seen again, their names lost to time, their fates absorbed into the mythology of the underground. Beyond the supernatural, urban explorers have pushed stranger ideas. Could some of these sightings point to hidden aspects of the subway system? Secret government trains, used during the Cold War, running on lines the public never knew existed. Rumors persist of a private line built for presidents, stretching from Midtown Manhattan to secret, secure locations. Others claim hidden tunnels once connected to banks or military facilities, now sealed and erased from official records. Could phantom sightings be brief glimpses into this hidden network, mistaken for ghosts because the truth was equally concealed? Standing on a late-night platform, when the air shifts and the distant hum of electricity seems to pulse in rhythm with the dark, it's easy to see how such legends endure. The subway, after all, is not just a transportation system. It is a living labyrinth filled with forgotten corners, bricked-up stairways, and silent chambers where time seems suspended. In such a place, where history and secrecy are layered into stone, is it any wonder that mystery finds a home? Mainstream voices caution that the phantom subway trains are products of imagination, exaggeration, or misunderstood encounters with the very real but unseen machinery of the system. Yet the persistence of the stories tells us something deeper, that beneath New York's surface lies not only infrastructure, but a psychological space where fears and fascinations merge. The subway is both public and private, crowded and lonely, ordinary and extraordinary. In that duality, the ghost train is not just possible, it feels inevitable. And so, we are left with lingering questions. Are the phantom subway trains nothing more than echoes of steel and light, mistaken by tired eyes in the small hours of the morning? Or are they reminders of history never fully buried, spectral shadows of trains and people lost to the city's underground past? The mystery endures in every unexplained rumble, every flicker of movement at the edge of vision, every late-night ride when the tunnels feel infinite and alive. And we are left to wonder, what really moves through New York's subways when no one is watching? Could there be trains gliding eternally beneath the city, unseen but not unfelt? Ghostly passengers on journeys that never end? From the tunnels deep below the city, where phantom trains are said to glide unseen through forgotten tracks, we rise once again to the surface, to a building that stands as both an architectural marvel and a vessel of lingering enigmas. At the corner of 72nd Street and Central Park West, the Dakota building looms like a fortress from another age. Its spires, gables, and ornate stonework seem almost out of place amid Manhattan's grid, as though it were transplanted from a European city centuries older than New York itself. And yet, behind its heavy iron gates and within its echoing halls, the Dakota has gathered a reputation not only for wealth and fame, but also for mystery. Built in the 1880s, when Central Park West was still sparsely developed, the Dakota was the vision of architect Henry Janeway Hardenberg, who would later design the Plaza Hotel. Its construction was bold for its time, a grand apartment house in an era when the wealthy still preferred private mansions. Rising 9 stories, its design combined Renaissance and Gothic Revival elements with steep gables, turrets, and deep archways. For decades, it has been home to some of the most celebrated figures in New York's cultural life: artists, musicians, actors, and writers. Yet its fame is inextricably tied not just to luxury, but to death, tragedy, and whispers of the unexplained. The most infamous event occurred on December 8, 1980, when John Lennon, a resident of the Dakota, was shot and killed just outside its entrance. The archway where he fell has since become a site of pilgrimage for fans worldwide, and Lennon's spirit is often said to linger near the building. Visitors and residents alike have reported feeling an uncanny presence in that space, an atmosphere thick with memory, grief, and something indescribable. But the Dakota's mysteries long predate Lennon. Since its earliest days, stories of apparitions have circulated within its walls. Staff and residents have claimed to see a spectral figure of a little girl dressed in turn-of-the-century clothing, said to appear in hallways or stairwells, smiling silently before fading into shadow. Others speak of a man with a child's face, drifting through the upper floors, or of ghostly footsteps echoing at night when no one is near. Mainstream explanations point to the building's age and atmosphere. The Dakota is filled with dark wood interiors, gaslight-era fixtures, and high-ceilinged rooms that seem to hold sound longer than expected. Drafts whisper through its corridors, and its very architecture, ornate, looming, heavy with detail, invites the imagination to animate its corners. In such a place, shadows stretch longer, and history feels closer. Could the so-called hauntings be no more than the mind's response to a setting already steeped in memory and drama? Yet others find the coincidences difficult to dismiss. Strange electrical disturbances are said to plague certain apartments, lights flickering, radios turning on without cause. Lennon himself once spoke of seeing a white figure in the Dakota, describing it as a ghostly presence he called the Crying Lady. His widow, Yoko Ono, later claimed she saw Lennon's spirit after his death, sitting at his piano, assuring her that he was still with her. The Dakota's cultural resonance adds another layer to its mystery. Roman Polanski's 1968 film Rosemary's Baby, a story of occult rituals and hidden conspiracies, was filmed there. The building's brooding facade became the perfect backdrop for a tale of the supernatural. For some, the choice of location felt too perfect, as if the Dakota itself had long been waiting to play such a role. Afterward, its association with darkness and the uncanny only deepened, cementing its place in the imagination as more than just a residence, but a stage for the strange. Speculative theories reach further still. Some suggest the Dakota sits on land that carries older hidden histories. Before Central Park was built, this area housed small settlements, including Seneca Village, a community of free black residents and immigrants displaced in the mid-19th century. Could the ground itself carry memories of displacement and loss, feeding into the building's aura of unease? Others wonder if the Dakota's very design, its fortress-like appearance, its imposing bulk, creates an atmosphere conducive to stories of the paranormal. There are even whispers of secret chambers or passageways within its walls. Though no definitive proof has ever been found, rumors persist that the Dakota was constructed with concealed rooms, perhaps for storage or privacy, now forgotten by time. Could such spaces explain the sounds and sightings? Or do they simply reflect the human tendency to project mystery into places we cannot fully know? Walking past the Dakota today, its facade rises in stark contrast to the modern skyline. It seems almost deliberately set apart, a reminder of another century, another vision of the city. The iron gates, the high windows, the shadows cast across its courtyard, all suggest a place layered with meaning. For residents, it is home. For visitors, it is a landmark of tragedy and fame. But for those attuned to mystery, it remains a threshold between the ordinary and the unexplained. And so the Dakota endures as one of New York's most enigmatic buildings. Its history is written in wealth and celebrity, but also in grief, apparitions, and unanswered questions. Are its ghosts merely the echoes of memory, the psychological weight of events too large to fade? Or does the Dakota truly harbor something more? Spirits tied to its walls, to its land, to the stories that have unfolded at its gates? We may never know. But as the sun sets over Central Park West and the Dakota's silhouette darkens against the sky, one cannot help but feel its presence, not just as a building, but as a mystery. And we are left to wonder, what secrets still linger behind its windows, in its stairwells, in the silence of its halls? From the brooding silhouette of the Dakota building with its whispered tales of ghosts and tragedies, we move to another New York landmark once filled with glamour, scandal, and ultimately blood. On the rooftop of Madison Square Garden, an opulent space of music, lights, and high society, an act of violence unfolded that shocked the city and left behind lingering questions. It was the murder of Stanford White, one of America's most celebrated architects, a crime as public as it was mysterious. Picture Madison Square Garden as it stood in 1906, not the modern arena we know today, but the grand second incarnation designed by White himself. Rising over Madison Square with its majestic tower, modeled after the Giralda in Seville, it was more than a venue. It was a palace of entertainment, theaters, galleries, rooftop gardens, and ballrooms where New York's elite gathered under glowing lights. That rooftop, decorated with arches and open to the summer air, was the pride of the city. And it was there, on the night of June 25th, that Stanford White met his end. White was no ordinary man. As a partner in the firm McKim, Mead, and White, he had shaped the very skyline of New York. The Washington Square Arch, the second Madison Square Garden, the New York Herald Building, all bore his hand. He moved in the highest circles, a man of charisma, wealth, and influence. But beneath the veneer of elegance, White harbored secrets, scandals of affairs, whispered liaisons, and a reputation for indulgence that, in time, would prove his undoing. That night, White had taken his seat at a rooftop theater performance. The air was warm, the show lighthearted, and the city stretched out beneath the stars. At around 11 p.m., as the show's finale began, a man approached him. Without warning, 3 gunshots rang out. White slumped in his chair, dead almost instantly. Panic swept across the rooftop. Women screamed and chaos erupted. His killer did not flee. Instead, he stood calmly, declaring, "He ruined my wife." The shooter was Harry K. Thaw, a wealthy Pittsburgh millionaire known for his volatile temper and obsession with White. The woman at the center of it all was Evelyn Nesbit, a young chorus girl whose beauty had made her the darling of New York society. Years earlier, when she was barely 16, she had become involved with White. Rumors of seduction, coercion, and betrayal swirled around their relationship. Thaw, later Evelyn's husband, grew obsessed with the idea that White had corrupted her, and his jealousy festered until it erupted in murder. On the surface, the case seemed straightforward: a jealous husband avenging his wife's honor. Newspapers dubbed it the crime of the century, splashing Evelyn's face across front pages, sensationalizing every detail of her life. The trial that followed, equally sensational, introduced the phrase "trial of the century" into public discourse. Thaw pleaded temporary insanity, his lawyers arguing that his act was not murder but righteous vengeance, driven by moral outrage. Yet beneath the public drama, deeper mysteries persisted. Was Thaw truly insane, or was his plea carefully crafted by his defense team? Did Evelyn's testimony tell the full truth of her relationship with White, or was it shaped by the pressures of scandal and survival in a society quick to condemn women but eager to devour their stories? And most haunting of all, was White merely a victim of jealousy, or did his death expose darker truths about the hidden world of power, privilege, and exploitation in Gilded Age New York? Some historians argue that White's death was the inevitable outcome of a culture of secrecy and indulgence among the elite. White was known for his red velvet swing, a private playroom where he entertained young women, often with champagne, opulence, and whispers of impropriety. Was Thaw's act simply the eruption of one man's obsession, or was it a violent crack in a facade that concealed widespread exploitation? Others see the case as a cautionary tale of obsession. Thaw's jealousy consumed him, magnified by wealth and entitlement. Yet even here, contradictions abound. He was convicted not of murder, but confined to an asylum after his insanity plea succeeded. Years later, he was released, living the rest of his life outside prison walls. Was justice truly served, or was it reshaped by privilege, just as the narratives of Evelyn and White had been reshaped in the courtroom? Speculative interpretations have lingered as well. Some point to inconsistencies in witness accounts, raising questions about whether the shooting was truly as spontaneous as it appeared. Could others in Thaw's orbit have encouraged the act, pushing him to rid society of a man whose secrets risked exposure? Or did Thaw himself deliberately stage the drama in public, ensuring that his vengeance would not only kill White, but destroy his reputation forever? Today, the rooftop where White died no longer exists. Madison Square Garden has been rebuilt multiple times, its original grandeur replaced by modern steel and concrete. Yet the story lingers, not just as a tale of jealousy and violence, but as a window into a city of contradictions. Opulence masking scandal, power masking vulnerability. The murder of Stanford White remains in many ways unresolved. Not because we do not know who pulled the trigger. Harry Thaw's guilt was never in doubt, but because the deeper truths remain elusive. Was this simply a crime of passion, or a symbol of the darker undercurrents of New York's Gilded Age? Did it expose a single man's fall, or the rot of an entire system of privilege? As we reflect on that night in 1906, the image is haunting. The rooftop garden glittering with lights, the music playing, the sudden eruption of gunfire that silenced one of the city's greatest architects. And we are left with questions that echo through history. What secrets truly lay behind White's gilded walls, and how much of the story was left untold, buried beneath scandal, reputation, and the shadows of high society? From the glittering rooftop of Madison Square Garden, where one of New York's most celebrated architects met a violent end, we descend once again underground, to a place that Stanford White himself might have admired. For while his hand shaped much of the city's skyline, another jewel of design rests beneath the streets, the City Hall subway station. A marvel of early 20th century architecture, it was once hailed as one of the most beautiful transit hubs in the world. But after its closure, silence and shadow reclaimed it, and with them came stories of something unseen. Whispers of a ghost said to linger there, haunting one of New York's most forgotten spaces. Step into City Hall Station, even today when it is rarely open to the public, and the first impression is striking. Built in 1904 as part of the city's very first subway line, it was no ordinary stop. Architects Hines and Lafarge designed it with grandeur in mind. Sweeping vaulted ceilings of Guastavino tile, wrought iron chandeliers, arched skylights that once filtered daylight into the tunnels. Its curved platform glowed with elegance, intended as a civic showcase for a city stepping proudly into the modern age. Unlike the more utilitarian stations that followed, City Hall was built to inspire, yet beauty alone could not preserve it. By 1945, the station was closed, its curved tracks ill-suited for longer trains, its location overshadowed by the nearby Brooklyn Bridge station. Doors were sealed, stairways gated, the chandeliers dimmed, the skylights fell dark, and dust began to gather on the tiles. But in that silence, rumors grew. Visitors and transit workers who ventured into the abandoned station spoke of strange sensations. The feeling of being watched, cold drafts that seemed to come from nowhere, and the sound of footsteps echoing long after the living had gone. Some claimed to see a figure, shrouded, indistinct, standing at the far end of the platform only to vanish when approached. Others reported fleeting glimpses through the train windows as the 6th line curved past the old station. A shape on the platform, a shadow beneath the chandeliers, a face in the dark. Mainstream explanations are easy to offer. Shadows and reflections play tricks on the eye. Dust motes in the dim light can seem to take on human form. And for those catching only a brief glimpse from a moving train, the mind can easily mistake shapes in the architecture for something alive. But the persistence of the accounts gives pause. If it were only 1 or 2 reports, they might be dismissed. Yet the story of the City Hall ghost has endured for decades, retold by riders, workers, and even urban explorers who managed to slip into the station. Some say the ghost is that of a worker who died during the station's construction in the early 1900s. Records of accidents were often downplayed at the time, but the dangers of digging tunnels and laying tracks beneath the city were immense. Could one of those lost have remained, tethered to the very place he helped create? Others link the ghost to passengers from the station's heyday, perhaps someone who spent a final journey beneath its vaulted ceilings, only to linger in death. Speculative theories push further. The station was inaugurated in 1904 with great ceremony, attended by the city's leaders and the press. Some imagine that the grandeur of that moment, its pride, its sense of civic triumph, left an imprint, a kind of spiritual echo. Perhaps what people see is not a ghost in the traditional sense, but a memory replayed in the dim light of the station. The shadow of a figure from that opening day, still pacing beneath the chandeliers. Others note the station's proximity to City Hall above. Could the energies of politics, of ambition and power, concentrated in that space, have seeped down into the tunnels, animating them with echoes of the past? Or is it simply that a place so beautiful, so carefully crafted, refuses to be forgotten, that its ghost is not a person, but the station itself, haunting those who pass it by? Walking through the sealed doors of City Hall Station today, the feeling is uncanny. The silence is thick, broken only by the distant rumble of trains passing nearby. The chandeliers still hang, though long extinguished. The arched tiles gleam faintly under flashlight beams, their patterns intricate, almost hypnotic. In that atmosphere, with history pressing close and darkness filling the gaps, it is not difficult to see why people speak of ghosts. And perhaps that is the deeper mystery, why we insist on imagining presence in absence. City Hall Station is closed, forgotten, hidden away. But in our minds, it remains alive, with passengers long gone, with workers never acknowledged, with shadows that may or may not move on their own. The legend of the ghost endures not because it has been proven, but because it feels fitting. A station built to inspire, locked away and abandoned, seems destined to harbor spirits. Whether they are literal souls of the dead or simply the weight of memory made manifest, the effect is the same. An unease, a curiosity, a sense that in this forgotten space beneath the city, something lingers. And so we are left with questions. Do the ghostly sightings in City Hall Station reveal an actual haunting, or are they the reflections of our own longing to find meaning in forgotten places? When passengers glance out of the 6 train and see something on the platform, are they glimpsing the past, their imagination, or something else entirely? Whatever the truth, it remains locked in the silence of those vaulted halls, waiting in the dark. And as the trains continue to glide past, carrying millions who may never know what lies behind the sealed doors, one cannot help but wonder who or what still walks the platform of the City Hall subway station. From the shadowed silence of City Hall Station, where a ghost is said to pace among the tiled arches of an abandoned platform, we rise once more to the surface, this time into the dazzling lights of Broadway. Yet even here, amid music, laughter, and the shimmer of stagecraft, the city's mysteries endure. For in the heart of Times Square stands a theater where history and legend intertwine, a place said to be haunted by one of its own stars. This is the story of the New Amsterdam Theater Ghost. The New Amsterdam Theater opened its doors in 1903, a jewel of the Broadway district and one of the most lavish venues of its age. Designed in the Art Nouveau style, it was filled with gilded details, sweeping staircases and murals painted with mythological figures. Its stage hosted the famed Ziegfeld Follies, productions that defined an era of glamour and spectacle. Celebrities, politicians, and wealthy patrons filled its seats, while on stage chorus girls and stars alike became icons of beauty and entertainment. Among them was Olive Thomas, a radiant actress and model who quickly rose to fame as one of Ziegfeld's most beloved showgirls. With striking features and undeniable charm, she embodied the energy of the era, daring, modern, and unforgettable. Yet her life was cut tragically short. In 1920, while on a trip to Paris, she ingested mercury bichloride, a toxic substance used to treat her husband's syphilis. Whether it was an accident, suicide, or something darker has never been fully determined. She died at just 25, her stardom extinguished as suddenly as it had flared. But for many, Olive Thomas never truly left the stage. Since her death, reports of Olive's ghost haunting the New Amsterdam have circulated among cast and crew. She is often described as appearing in a beaded green Ziegfeld-era costume, sometimes carrying a blue bottle, the same type of bottle said to have held the mercury compound that killed her. Witnesses claim she lingers in mirrors backstage, her reflection visible even when no one else is present. Some have seen her glide through hallways, a faint smile on her face, vanishing as quickly as she appears. At first, the stories seemed like superstition, theater folklore meant to add mystique to the aging playhouse. Theatrical spaces, after all, often inspire such tales. Dim lighting, long hours, and the heightened emotions of performance all create fertile ground for ghost stories. But what sets Olive apart is the sheer number of reports and the consistency of her description across generations. From stagehands to modern Disney employees, the company that now owns and operates the theater, accounts of Olive's presence have continued well into the 21st century. Mainstream explanations offer rational alternatives. The New Amsterdam, with its ornate architecture and maze of backstage corridors, is filled with reflective surfaces and shifting shadows. The stress of performing in a historic, high-pressure space can prime the mind to interpret flickers of light or faint noises as something supernatural. In a building more than a century old, the natural creaks and groans of settling wood, or the drafts through hidden passages, can easily inspire feelings of unease. And yet, there are details harder to dismiss. Some claim Olive's appearances coincide with moments of tension, actors struggling during rehearsals, stagehands working late under pressure. One cast member recalled seeing her before an important premiere, interpreting it as a blessing rather than a threat. Others have noted her playful nature, lights flickering, props moved mysteriously, or the faint sound of laughter echoing where no one should be. Speculative theories venture further. Was Olive Thomas's death truly an accident, or did unresolved grief anchor her spirit to the theater where she found her greatest joy? Did her sudden loss leave behind an energy so powerful that it imprinted itself upon the New Amsterdam's walls, playing itself out again and again in fleeting glimpses? Some even suggest she chooses to remain not out of torment, but out of love, that the stage was her true home, and so she lingers, watching over it still. For theater folk, Olive's ghost is not feared but embraced. Her portrait hangs prominently backstage, a quiet acknowledgement of her continued presence. New actors are often told her story as part of their initiation into the theater's culture. Many even say, "Good night, Olive," when leaving, a ritual of respect that seems to acknowledge that she is still, in some way, part of the company. Standing in the New Amsterdam today, amid its restored chandeliers and frescoes, it is easy to understand why Olive's story persists. The theater itself feels timeless, as if every performance leaves an echo that never fully fades. In that atmosphere, a ghost seems not only possible but inevitable, and when audiences applaud, when the curtain falls and the lights dim, perhaps it is not only the living who hear the call of Broadway. The story of Olive Thomas raises a larger question, one that extends beyond the theater. Do the places we love, the places that shape us, hold us even after death? If joy, ambition, and tragedy intertwine in a single space, does some part of us remain behind, unwilling to let go? The New Amsterdam Theater endures as both a monument to Broadway's golden age and as a home to its most famous ghost. Whether Olive Thomas truly walks its halls, or whether her memory simply lingers in the imaginations of those who know her story, the effect is the same. Her presence is felt. And as the curtain rises, as the music swells and the spotlight shines, one cannot help but wonder, who else might be watching from the shadows, smiling silently from another time? From the shimmering stage lights of Broadway, where Olive Thomas is said to linger in the shadows of the New Amsterdam Theater, our journey carries us only a few blocks north to a quieter but no less storied landmark. Nestled on West 44th Street, the Algonquin Hotel has long been a sanctuary for writers, actors, and critics, a place where wit and creativity once filled the air as tangibly as smoke from a cigarette or the clink of glasses. But beneath its refined reputation lies a mystery whispered among staff and guests alike. The tale of a room that does not always exist. The Algonquin's Phantom Room. At first glance, the Algonquin is a monument to literary and theatrical history. Opened in 1902, its wood-paneled lobby, polished brass fixtures, and velvet armchairs evoke a bygone era. It became most famous in the 1920s as the meeting place of the Algonquin Round Table, a group of writers, journalists, and actors whose sharp wit and conversation defined a generation of American humor. Dorothy Parker, Robert Benchley, George S. Kaufman, they all gathered here, trading barbs over cocktails, shaping the cultural voice of the Jazz Age. Yet, amid this lively history, a quieter, darker story took shape. Guests and employees have long spoken of a room, sometimes numbered 332, sometimes 237, depending on the telling, that seems to flicker in and out of existence. A room not listed on maps, not booked in ledgers, yet occasionally offered to a weary traveler when the hotel is full. Accounts describe guests being led down a hallway, opening the door, and spending the night in a perfectly ordinary Algonquin room, only to learn later that the room does not exist in any record. When staff return to check, the hallway seems slightly different. The door is no longer there. The mainstream explanation, of course, is that these are misremembered details, errors of memory amplified by the hotel's shifting renovations over time. The Algonquin has seen countless remodels since its opening. Rooms have been combined, renumbered, or repurposed. A guest might have stayed in a space later reconfigured, leading to the impression of a vanishing room. But this practical explanation does not account for the uncanny consistency of the reports or for the lingering unease that many describe. Some versions of the legend tie the phantom room to a tragedy. Whispers speak of a guest, an actor, a writer, perhaps even an unknown drifter, who died there under mysterious circumstances, long before the hotel's rise to fame. Was it suicide, an overdose, or something darker? The details shift with the telling, but the theme remains. The room was closed off, erased from memory, its number scrubbed from records. And yet, somehow, it persists, flickering back into being for reasons no one fully understands. Staff members over the decades have recounted their own unsettling experiences, a key that works only once, a hallway that feels longer than it should, doors that appear at odd angles. Some claim to hear faint typewriter keys clicking in empty rooms, echoes of the round table writers who once filled the hotel with words and laughter. Others speak of sudden chills, the sensation of being watched, or of voices drifting through the walls when no one is there. Speculative theories abound. Could the phantom room be an example of architectural memory, a kind of imprint left behind by a space even after it has been physically altered? Buildings, after all, carry layers of history in their walls. Or might it be something more elusive, a slip in time, a moment when past and present overlap, and guests find themselves sleeping in a room that no longer belongs to their world? There are even suggestions of psychological influence. The Algonquin is so steeped in history that guests may unconsciously project mystery onto it. The very knowledge that Dorothy Parker once quipped at the round table, or that the corridors once echoed with the voices of theatrical legends, primes the imagination to find meaning in shadows. But imagination alone cannot fully explain the stories of keys that vanish, doors that refuse to open a second time, or entire rooms that appear and disappear like mirages. Walking the Algonquin's corridors today, one feels the weight of its layered past. The carpeting muffles every footstep, the dim sconces cast long shadows, and the wood-paneled walls seem to lean in as if listening. It is not hard to imagine a door materializing where yesterday there was none, or to feel the faint pull of a handle to a room that, by all official accounts, should not exist. What makes the phantom room so compelling is its subtlety. Unlike more dramatic hauntings, there are no violent poltergeists, no apparitions in mirrors. Instead, it is a quiet mystery, an absence that occasionally becomes presence. It is the kind of enigma that feels fitting for a hotel that once celebrated wit and wordplay. A ghost story written in riddles with no definitive ending. And so the legend of the phantom room endures. Is it simply the product of renovation and rumor, of memory and imagination? Or is there truly a room in the Algonquin that refuses to be erased? A fragment of history insisting on being remembered? As guests still check in, still pass through its famous lobby and climb its narrow staircases, the question remains. Perhaps one night, when the hotel is full, a weary traveler will once again be handed a key to a room that is not on the register. They will sleep there in comfort, unaware of the mystery, until they return to the desk and are told there is no such room. And we are left to ask, in a city of constant reinvention, how many forgotten spaces still exist in the margins? Rooms, tunnels, or doors that the present has tried to erase but the past refuses to release? From the vanished doorways and shifting halls of the Algonquin Hotel, where a room seems to appear and disappear at will, our path leads east into the historic heart of the East Village. Here, beneath the shadow of trees and surrounded by weathered headstones, stands St. Mark's Church in the Bowery. It is one of New York's oldest surviving churches, a structure whose brick and stone have witnessed centuries of triumph and tragedy. But alongside its tangible history lies an enigma that continues to haunt the imagination: the mystery of the phantom bell ringer. St. Mark's Church has long been a fixture of New York life. Built in 1799 on land once owned by Peter Stuyvesant, the last Dutch Director General of New Amsterdam, it rests on sacred ground where worship has taken place since the 1600s. Its white steeple and Gothic Revival windows rise quietly above 2nd Avenue, contrasting sharply with the bustling city that now surrounds it. Inside, the air is still and heavy, carrying the faint scent of wood polish and candle wax. Outside, the churchyard holds the graves of poets, politicians, and pioneers. It is a place where history feels palpably alive. But it is the church's bells that hold the greatest mystery. For generations, passers-by and parishioners have reported hearing them ring at odd hours, sometimes in the dead of night, sometimes at dawn, when no hand was near the rope and no scheduled peal was set to sound. The phantom ringing has been described as solemn and measured, as if marking an unseen event. At other times, it is said to echo frantically, clanging with urgency, though no one was there to pull the rope. The legend ties itself, inevitably, to Peter Stuyvesant. The stern, one-legged governor, nicknamed Peg Leg Pete, was buried in the churchyard in 1672, his remains lying only steps from the steeple. Stuyvesant's presence has long been associated with hauntings in the area, with tales of his ghost pacing the grounds, his wooden leg thumping against the cobblestones. Some say the phantom bell ringer is none other than Stuyvesant himself, continuing to oversee the land he once ruled, his hand forever tugging the rope to remind the living of his authority. Mainstream explanations lean toward the practical. The bells of old churches are intricate mechanisms, and even a shift in temperature or a sudden gust of wind could cause them to sway and sound. Loose ropes, contracting metal, or even vibrations from nearby construction might be enough to set the bells in motion. For those awake in the stillness of night, the sound might feel uncanny, more haunting than mechanical. But does physics alone explain why the ringing has been reported for centuries, often by multiple witnesses at once and always at peculiar moments? Some accounts suggest that the phantom ringing coincides with moments of upheaval. Parishioners in the 19th century reported the bells sounding without cause on the eve of the Civil War, as if tolling in anticipation of bloodshed. Others claim they rang mysteriously during storms or after the death of prominent citizens. Could the bells act as omens, sounding when events of great consequence are near? Or is this merely coincidence, memory retroactively weaving mystery into the fabric of history? Speculative theories go further still. Some believe that the phantom ringer is not Stuyvesant, but one of the many others buried in the churchyard, perhaps an old sexton or a forgotten parishioner, bound to the church even after death. Others imagine that the ringing is not caused by a ghost at all, but by the weight of centuries themselves. echoes of long-past ceremonies replaying in time, reverberating through the stone and air as if refusing to be silenced. And then there are the darker whispers. A few claim that the ringing heralds not only misfortune, but a reminder of debts unpaid, echoes of promises broken, of lives cut short by the city's relentless march forward. In this view, the bells are not announcing events to come, but demanding remembrance for events already forgotten. Standing in the churchyard at dusk, one feels the weight of the centuries. The city hums beyond the iron gates, yet here, amid tilting gravestones and ancient oaks, time seems to slow. The steeple looms above, its bells silent, but the imagination is quickened by silence. One can almost hear the sudden clang, unexpected and unprovoked, vibrating in the still air as if someone unseen were at work in the tower. The mystery of the phantom bell ringer endures precisely because it resists final explanation. Rational causes cannot fully erase the persistence of testimony, while the ghostly theories only deepen the intrigue. Is it a trick of wind and weather, a quirk of old metal, or is there truly a hand beyond the veil, tugging the rope at hours when the living have all gone home? And so, the bells of St. Mark's still hang as they have for centuries, silent until struck. Yet the question lingers. When they sound unexpectedly, who is it that rings them? Is it the restless spirit of a long-dead governor, reminding us that his power still echoes through the ages? Or is it something older, stranger, an imprint of history itself, demanding to be heard in the city that has grown around it? Whatever the answer, the phantom bell ringer remains a part of New York's hidden lore, a sound in the night that leaves the listener unsettled and curious. And we are left to wonder, when the bells of St. Mark's toll without cause, who, if anyone, listens from the shadows? From the tolling of phantom bells at St. Mark's, echoing across centuries, we move toward another enduring mystery, one tied not to a church steeple, but to one of New York's most iconic symbols. Rising in stone and steel above the East River, the Brooklyn Bridge has long been more than a feat of engineering. Since its completion in 1883, it has been a monument of ambition, a pathway between boroughs and, for some, a stage for acts of daring or despair. Among its many legends, one story continues to puzzle and inspire: the account of a man who leapt from the bridge and lived. The Brooklyn Bridge was the marvel of its time. Stretching over 1,500 feet, supported by Gothic arches and web-like cables, it was hailed as the eighth wonder of the world. Its completion symbolized progress, yet also carried a darker weight. Dozens of workers had perished during its construction, some in accidents, others in the hidden affliction of caisson disease, the bends brought on by working in pressurized chambers beneath the riverbed. The bridge was, from its very beginnings, a place where triumph and tragedy were bound together. So when rumors began to spread of people leaping from its span, the bridge took on another, more haunting reputation. Some sought to end their lives in the waters below, while others were driven by spectacle, the chance to defy death in front of a watching city. It is within this context that the story of the Brooklyn Bridge jumper emerges. The most famous account dates to the 1880s, not long after the bridge opened. A man, his name given in some newspapers as Steve Brody, though others dispute the details, was said to have leapt from the bridge into the East River and survived. The fall, more than 130 feet, should have been fatal. The speed of descent, the force of impact, the icy currents, all should have made survival impossible. And yet, according to reports, he lived. Crowds marveled. Newspapers carried the story with relish, portraying Brody as both foolhardy daredevil and folk hero. Some celebrated him for his courage, while others accused him of staging the leap, claiming he had dropped a dummy into the river while slipping away unnoticed. The details varied. Some said he dove cleanly, breaking the water just right. Others claimed he landed feet first, minimizing impact. A few insisted he survived only because he struck the water at just the right angle, by sheer chance. Mainstream explanations emphasize probability. It is not impossible, though vanishingly rare, to survive a fall from such a height if conditions are favorable. The tide may have been high, the water less turbulent than usual. Brody, or whoever the jumper truly was, may have entered the water in a way that reduced the impact, avoiding catastrophic injury. Still, the likelihood remains slim. Most who attempted such leaps did not live to tell the tale. And that is where the mystery deepens. Was the story true at all, or was it a fabrication? Skeptics point out that no independent witnesses confirmed Brody's survival. Some newspapers at the time dismissed it as a publicity stunt, designed to draw attention to Brody's saloon business in the Bowery. Others argued the legend took on a life of its own, retold so often it became fact in the public mind. Yet the legend refused to die. Over the years, others claimed to repeat the feat, with mixed and often tragic results. But it was always Brody's name that endured, becoming part of New York's folklore. Even today, the phrase "doing a Brody" survives in American slang, meaning a reckless leap or daring risk. Speculative theories abound. Some believe Brody never jumped, but cleverly manipulated the press, dropping a dummy from the bridge while slipping away downstream to resurface triumphantly. Others suggest he did jump, but from a lower height, staging the illusion of a full leap. And still others hold that he truly survived the impossible, becoming a living symbol of the bridge's strange duality, a monument where life and death hang by a thread. Standing on the Brooklyn Bridge today, with the skyline rising in every direction and the river flowing far below, it is easy to see how the legend captivates. The wind whips across the span, the cables hum with tension, and the drop into the East River feels both thrilling and terrifying. Could anyone truly survive such a plunge? Or is the legend of the Brooklyn Bridge jumper less about fact and more about the city's need to tell stories of resilience in the face of danger? The mystery persists because no single answer satisfies. If Brody never jumped, how did the story spread so quickly, so convincingly, that it endured for generations? If he did jump, how did he survive when so many others did not? Was it chance, skill, or something else, something that resists explanation? And so we are left with a paradox, much like the bridge itself. A place of engineering brilliance shadowed by tragedy, a span that unites two boroughs but also divides life from death, possibility from impossibility. The tale of the jumper who lived remains suspended, like the bridge's own cables, between myth and reality. And as the sun sets over the East River, turning the arches of the Brooklyn Bridge into silhouettes against the sky, one question continues to echo. What truly happened that day when a man leapt from the bridge and walked away alive? From the impossible survival of a man leaping from the Brooklyn Bridge, we turn now to another enigma, one not of death defied, but of life itself. For while some mysteries of New York are rooted in architecture, crime, or tragedy, others tread the fragile line between folklore and the inexplicable. Among the streets of Harlem, a neighborhood rich in history, culture, and resilience, lingers a story that seems almost too strange to believe, the legend of the Green Children. Harlem has always been a place of transformation. In the 19th century, it was farmland and estates. In the 20th, it became the beating heart of the Harlem Renaissance, a cultural movement of jazz, poetry, and art that reshaped the American identity. Its brownstones, churches, and bustling avenues hold the weight of generations. And yet, amid the documented brilliance of Harlem's history, there is a quieter, more elusive tale, one that defies both explanation and categorization. Accounts vary, but the essence of the story remains. At some point in the early 20th century, some say the 1920s, others place it decades later, 2 children were said to have appeared in Harlem under mysterious circumstances. They were described as siblings, a boy and a girl, with unusual greenish-tinged skin. They spoke little, if at all, and their origins were unknown. No one could say where they came from, and no records seemed to exist of their families. They simply appeared. The tale immediately calls to mind the much older legend of the Green Children of Woolpit from medieval England. In that account, too, 2 strange children were found with skin said to be green, speaking an unknown language, claiming to have come from a place of perpetual twilight. That story has been told for centuries as folklore. Could Harlem's account be a distant echo, a modern variation of an ancient myth transplanted into the streets of New York? Or was it something else entirely? Witnesses, though scarce and largely anecdotal, described the Harlem children as quiet but gentle, bewildered but not threatening. Some said they were taken in briefly by local families, though none could say what became of them. Others insisted they vanished as suddenly as they appeared, absorbed into the city's fabric like so many other forgotten lives. The green tint of their skin, sometimes described as faint, other times as unmistakable, remains the most unsettling detail. Mainstream explanations attempt to ground the story in possibility. Medical historians have suggested conditions like hypochromic anemia or chlorosis, illnesses that can give the skin a pale, greenish cast. Malnutrition, particularly in children, can cause strange discolorations as well. In Harlem during the early 20th century, poverty and poor diets were common among struggling families. Could the green skin simply have been a physical symptom misunderstood, then exaggerated into legend? Others lean on the city's history of immigration. Harlem was home to waves of newcomers from across the globe: Irish, Italian, Caribbean, African-American migrants from the South, all arriving with their own languages and customs. The children's supposed inability to communicate might have been nothing more than a language barrier, their difference magnified into mystery by rumor and retelling. And yet, the strangeness of the tale refuses to dissolve. If the green children were simply impoverished, malnourished, or foreign-born, why did their presence leave such a haunting impression? Why did their story echo the much older legend from across the ocean, down to its most peculiar detail, the green hue of their skin? Coincidence? Or something more? Speculative theories reach into stranger territory. Some suggest the Harlem children were runaways from secret medical experiments, their condition the result of treatments or toxins. The early 20th century was rife with unethical experimentation on vulnerable populations, often hidden from public view. Could the green children have been casualties of such practices, surfacing briefly in Harlem before vanishing again? Others, more imaginatively, see in them a folkloric archetype, visitors from another realm. Just as the medieval children of Woolpit claimed to come from a twilight world, could the Harlem children have been perceived, rightly or wrongly, as belonging to somewhere not of this earth? Were they symbols of the city's constant influx of the unfamiliar, or echoes of humanity's oldest myths finding new life in modern streets? Standing in Harlem today, among the vibrant murals, the hum of jazz clubs, and the enduring strength of community, the story of the green children feels both out of place and oddly fitting. Harlem has always been a crossroads of cultures, a place where identities merge, clash, and transform. Perhaps it is inevitable that a story so strange, 2 children with no past, no explanation, and skin the color of spring leaves, would find a home here. The mystery, like so many others, lies not only in whether the tale is true, but in why it persists. Was there really a brother and sister whose condition sparked whispers of the uncanny? Or was the story born from older myths, retold in a new setting, reshaped by the city's endless appetite for legend. And so the green children of Harlem remain an enigma, half folklore, half urban myth, perhaps rooted in truth, perhaps not. Their story leaves us with unsettling questions. If they truly walked those streets, who were they? Where did they come from? And why did they vanish without leaving a trace? In the end, perhaps that is the essence of the mystery. The green children remind us that even in a city as documented, as crowded, as watched as New York, there are still stories that slip through the cracks, whispers of the impossible lingering just at the edge of history. And we are left to wonder, did Harlem once harbor visitors not just from another land but from another world? From the strange tale of the green children of Harlem, where folklore seemed to bleed into lived history, we turn now toward the margins of the city, to a place once forgotten, shrouded in filth and fire. Just off the southern edge of Brooklyn, where the waters of Jamaica Bay lap against shifting sands, there once lay Barren Island. Its name alone carried an aura of desolation. Windswept, isolated, and foul-smelling, it was for decades the dumping ground of New York's unwanted, both refuse and people. Yet it was here, amid smoke, decay, and secrecy, that whispers of something monstrous began. They called it the Beast of Barren Island. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Barren Island was the site of rendering plants, where carcasses of dead animals from across the city were shipped to be boiled down into glue, fertilizer, and grease. The stench was overwhelming. Accounts describe a haze of smoke and an acrid odor drifting over the bay, carried by the wind as far as Brooklyn neighborhoods miles away. Workers, many of them immigrants desperate for employment, labored in grueling, dangerous conditions, largely cut off from the rest of New York. Fires smoldered constantly, and the island became synonymous with death, waste, and isolation. It was in this bleak setting that rumors of a strange creature began to emerge. Local fishermen and baymen claimed to glimpse a dark shape moving through the waters at night, larger than a seal, faster than a shark. Some said it had glowing eyes, visible even through fog. Others swore it came onto the island itself, skulking among the carcass piles and disappearing into the shadows of the plants. The workers, already surrounded by death, gave the stories credence. They whispered of strange noises in the night, low growls, heavy footfalls, crashes among the heaps of refuse. Something, they believed, was watching them. Mainstream voices dismissed the stories as products of fatigue and imagination. After all, the workers lived in harsh, filthy conditions, surrounded daily by death and rot. In such a place, a mind might invent horrors to explain every unexplained sound. Wildlife, too, provided plausible explanations. Seals and sturgeon were common in the bay. Dogs and wild pigs roamed the refuse piles. Could the Beast of Barren Island have been nothing more than a misidentified animal, magnified into legend by fear and isolation? But some details resist dismissal. Witnesses described the creature as unusually large, larger than any animal known to inhabit the region. Its movements were said to be deliberate, not frantic like scavenging pigs or dogs. And while sightings were inconsistent, the reports stretched across decades, suggesting more than a fleeting invention. Speculative theories spread quickly. Some suggested the beast was a mutation, born of the toxic environment. With so much decay, chemical runoff, and fire on Barren Island, could some animal have adapted grotesquely, growing larger and stranger than nature intended? Others saw it as a supernatural manifestation, an embodiment of the death and corruption that defined the island, a monster conjured by the collective suffering of its workers. There were even darker rumors. Some claimed the beast was not animal at all, but human, a deformed worker who had gone feral, hiding in the refuse, preying on animals and frightening those who crossed his path. The isolation of Barren Island, its lack of oversight, and the grim realities of poverty made such a story plausible to some. Yet if it were true, no evidence was ever produced. The story gained traction in local papers, often framed as eerie curiosity rather than fact. Headlines spoke of the beast of Barren Island with a mix of skepticism and fascination, ensuring the legend endured. Fishermen refused to go near the island at night. Workers avoided certain corners after dark, and though many dismissed it, the name itself became etched in New York's catalog of urban mysteries. By the 1930s, Barren Island's days were numbered. Robert Moses, in his sweeping reimagining of New York's shorelines, demolished the island's plants and cleared its settlements to make way for Floyd Bennett Field and later John F. Kennedy Airport. The community was dispersed, its history buried beneath tarmac and runways. But the beast's legend remained, lingering like the stench that once defined the island. Standing today near the edges of Jamaica Bay, where planes rise and descend over what was once Barren Island, one can scarcely imagine the grim world that existed there. The smoke, the carcasses, the workers toiling amid filth, it is all gone. And yet, in the silence of the bay, with its wide, shifting waters and marshes, it is easy to imagine something still stirring beneath the surface. Could the beast have been real, a creature lost to time and development? Or was it always a reflection of the environment itself, New York's waste, decay, and cruelty given monstrous form? The mystery of the beast of Barren Island persists because it embodies more than a creature. It speaks to the forgotten margins of the city, places where the unwanted were cast out, where oversight was scarce, and where suffering was hidden from view. In such places, legends grow easily, but legends often cling to a kernel of truth, and so we are left with questions. Was the beast an animal, a man, a trick of the senses, or something stranger still? Did it vanish with the island's destruction, or does it still linger in the waters of Jamaica Bay, unseen but not gone? Whatever the truth, the beast of Barren Island remains one of New York's most unsettling enigmas, and it invites us to wonder, in a city built on constant reinvention, how many other monsters have been buried beneath its progress, their stories forgotten, their shadows left behind. From the smoke and refuse of Barren Island, where whispers told of a beast born from decay, our path drifts north into another body of water, one far more familiar, yet no less mysterious. The East River, flowing between Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, has long been both lifeline and barrier, a restless waterway carrying commerce, secrets, and stories. But beneath its currents, amid the wreckage of centuries, there are tales of something stranger, sightings of a creature, immense and unaccountable, known in whispers as the East River Monster. At first glance, the East River hardly seems a place for monsters. It is not a river in the strictest sense, but a tidal strait, connecting Upper New York Bay to Long Island Sound. Its waters churn with powerful currents, surging back and forth with the tides. Ferries, tugboats, and barges navigate its surface, while beneath lie shipwrecks, sunken cars, even old munitions from wars long past. The river is as much graveyard as artery. In such depths, where visibility is scarce and the unknown thrives, it is easy to imagine something hidden. Reports of the East River Monster are scattered but persistent. As early as the 19th century, newspapers occasionally printed accounts of fishermen claiming to see a massive shape moving just below the surface, too large to be a sturgeon or shark. Some described a serpentine form, rising briefly before vanishing into the murk. Others swore to hearing unearthly sounds, deep, resonant bellows that seemed to echo from beneath the waves. One of the most famous modern encounters came in 2012, when a strange carcass washed up near Manhattan's East River Park. Nicknamed the East River Monster by tabloids, the bloated, hairless body, part pig, part dog, part unidentifiable, sparked a flurry of speculation. Was it a raccoon, a discarded laboratory specimen, or evidence of something unknown lurking in the water? Officials dismissed it as a decomposed animal, its appearance distorted by decay. But photographs spread widely, fueling fascination. Mainstream explanations for the East River Monster lean on the river's conditions. Its brackish water supports a variety of sea life, from striped bass to seals, and its strong currents can distort the size and shape of anything glimpsed fleetingly. Large sturgeon, which can grow over 7 feet long, once inhabited the area, and sightings of their armored bodies could easily inspire monstrous descriptions. Add to this the debris and pollution that fill the river, and strange shapes are inevitable. Yet, the reports persist, and some defy easy categorization. Witnesses describe creatures longer than any known fish in the region, moving with a fluidity that suggests something more serpentine. Some accounts liken it to classic sea monsters of myth, an elongated body, ridged back, glistening in the moonlight before slipping silently beneath the surface. Are these exaggerations born of imagination, or glimpses of something truly unknown? Speculative theories abound. Some suggest that the East River Monster is a surviving remnant of prehistoric times, a descendant of creatures thought long extinct, hiding in the depths of New York's waterways. Others posit that it could be a hybrid, mutated by the river's centuries of pollution and industrial runoff. In the late 20th century, environmental reports revealed alarming levels of toxins in the East River. Could some creature, adapting in ways science does not yet understand, have emerged from this toxic cradle? There are even whispers of government secrecy. The East River, after all, has long been a site of military and industrial dumping. Munitions from World War II were disposed of in its waters. Experiments, it is said, were quietly conducted in facilities nearby. Could the monster be the byproduct of hidden projects, surfacing only by accident before slipping away again? But perhaps the fascination lies less in the specifics of what the East River Monster might be, and more in what it represents. In a city so mapped, charted, and controlled, the river is one of the few places where mystery still thrives. Its depths are murky, its currents fierce, its contents unknowable. To stand on its banks at night, watching the lights of the bridges reflect on the dark surface, is to feel the weight of that unknowability. What drifts beneath, unseen by millions, moving silently below the ferries and bridges? The East River Monster embodies the tension between the known and the unknown, between the documented city above and the hidden world below. It asks us to confront the possibility that not everything has been explained, that even here in the very heart of New York, the unexpected can surface. And so we are left with questions. Were the sightings of a true creature, extraordinary and unclassified, surviving unnoticed in the shadows of the city? Or are they the products of imagination, distortions of ordinary animals glimpsed in extraordinary conditions? Whatever the case, the East River continues to flow, concealing its secrets. And when the water stirs unexpectedly, when a shadow seems too large, too deliberate, to be debris or fish, the old whispers return. Could it be that something still moves beneath the tides? Something vast, something unseen, something the city has not yet dared to name? From the swirling currents of the East River, where something vast and unseen is said to move beneath the tide, we turn now to a narrower, murkier waterway, one whose reputation is as infamous as any in New York. Flowing through Brooklyn's industrial heartland lies the Gowanus Canal, a stretch of stagnant water so toxic that it has been called a chemical soup, a scar of the city's industrial age. And yet, amid its oil-slicked surface and sulfurous stench, rumors persist of something alive, something unnatural, lurking in the depths. This is the mystery of the Gowanus Canal creature. The Gowanus Canal was dug in the mid-19th century, transforming a tidal creek into a commercial artery lined with factories, tanneries, and warehouses. Barges once crowded its waters, hauling cement, coal, and manufactured goods. But industry came at a cost. Waste was dumped directly into the canal. Chemical byproducts, animal remains, sewage, layering its bed with decades of sludge. By the 20th century, the water had become a stagnant pool of pollutants, its surface rainbowed with oil, its air heavy with rot. Locals joked it could catch fire at any moment. It is within this hostile environment that sightings of the Gowanus creature began. Fishermen claimed to see ripples on still water, larger than any fish could make. Workers reported sudden splashes at night, as if something heavy had moved just beneath the surface. In later decades, when the canal had largely ceased to function commercially, urban explorers spoke of strange shapes darting below, their glimpses quick but chilling. The descriptions varied, sometimes a long, eel-like form, other times a bulky shadow with fins, but all agreed. Something lived in those waters, against all odds. Mainstream explanations focus on the few hardy species that can survive in extreme conditions. Carp, catfish, and eels are known to inhabit polluted waters, their resilience bordering on miraculous. In recent years, with environmental cleanup efforts, crabs and small fish have begun to return. Could the creature be nothing more than an oversized fish fattened on decades of unusual diets? In 2013, for instance, a dolphin swam into the canal, drawing crowds as it struggled in the poisoned water before dying. To many, the dolphin proved that strange animals can and do find their way into the Gowanus, only to meet tragic ends. But the persistence of the creature stories suggests something more. Witnesses insist what they saw was too large, too strange, too deliberate in its movements to be explained by ordinary fish. Some describe eyes glinting just above the surface. Others claim to have heard guttural noises echoing between the warehouses at night. In the 1980s, when the canal was at its most neglected, rumors spread of a mutated being, born of chemicals and waste, that prowled the depths. It was said to feed on refuse, even on the occasional animal carcass tossed carelessly into the water. Speculative theories grew. Some claimed the creature was a relic of an earlier age, a prehistoric survivor that found refuge in the canal's murky isolation. Others imagined it as a mutant, a product of industrial toxins reshaping the DNA of ordinary fish into something monstrous. A few even linked it to urban legends of alligators in New York sewers, suggesting the Gowanus might host its own variant. Discarded pets grown large and dangerous in their toxic sanctuary. The most unsettling interpretations, however, come from those who see the creature not as an animal, but as a symbol, an embodiment of the canal itself. For over a century, the Gowanus absorbed everything the city cast off, its waters poisoned yet persistent. Could the creature be a kind of living manifestation of that history? A monster born not in biology, but in the imagination of a community forced to live alongside decay? If so, why does the legend feel so tangible, so specific, to those who claim to have seen it? Standing at the edge of the Gowanus Canal today, with its still surface reflecting the warehouses and row houses around it, the place feels uncanny. There is a silence here, broken only by the hum of traffic and the occasional splash. Beneath the surface lies layers of history, industrial sludge, sunken debris, even rumors of bodies. It is not hard to believe that something might move unseen below. its presence betrayed only by a ripple or a sudden disturbance of the oily water. What makes the Gowanus creature compelling is not only the question of its existence, but its defiance of possibility. How could anything survive in a place so inhospitable? And yet, perhaps that is precisely why the story endures. The idea that life, strange, distorted, tenacious, might cling even here speaks to both horror and fascination. And so the question lingers. Was the Gowanus creature ever real? A living being adapting in ways we cannot yet explain? Was it merely fish and imagination, magnified by fear and the grotesque backdrop of the Canal? Or was it something more? A story the city needed to tell, a monster for a waterway that had itself become monstrous. The Canal remains, a site of both decay and renewal, its waters slowly being dredged and cleaned. But even as the sludge is removed and the toxins diminished, the legend of the creature endures, and one cannot help but wonder, when the waters are finally clear, will we discover that nothing was ever there at all? Or will we find that the creature has been waiting all along, hidden in the depths unseen but not gone? From the poisoned waters of the Gowanus Canal, where rumors persist of a creature shaped by toxins and decay, we move now from the industrial wastelands into the sterile white walls of a hospital. But here too, poison would make itself known, not in the water or soil, but in a human being. In one of the strangest medical mysteries in New York's history, a woman walked into an emergency room, and within minutes, those around her began to collapse. To this day, no single explanation has fully resolved what became known as the case of the toxic lady. The incident occurred in the early 1990s. A woman suffering from advanced cancer was brought into a New York City emergency department. By all accounts, she appeared gravely ill but stable until the medical staff began their work. As nurses and doctors drew her blood, an odor spread through the room. Witnesses described it as sharp, chemical, almost like ammonia or garlic mixed with something metallic. Moments later, chaos erupted. Nurses fainted, doctors staggered. Respiratory distress, dizziness, and muscle spasms rippled through the room. Staff members collapsed one after another, forcing others to evacuate the emergency department. Patients on gurneys were wheeled into the hallways as hazmat teams rushed in. The emergency room, a place of healing, had become a place of fear. And at the center of it all lay one woman, whose body, inexplicably, seemed to be emitting something toxic. Mainstream investigations quickly followed. The woman's death was tragic but not unexpected given her illness. But why had those who treated her been poisoned? Tests of the room revealed no airborne contaminants. Initial speculation suggested mass hysteria, the idea that fear itself had triggered fainting and illness among staff, their symptoms psychosomatic rather than chemical. Hospitals are high-pressure environments, and panic can spread quickly. Could the entire episode have been a chain reaction of fear, magnified by the stressful setting? Yet, not all the evidence fit this neat explanation. Blood tests revealed that some staff members had indeed suffered from elevated levels of chemical compounds in their bodies. Too specific, too consistent, to be dismissed as hysteria. Something had entered their systems that night. But what? One theory pointed to the treatments the woman herself had been undergoing. Certain chemotherapy drugs can metabolize into compounds that produce unusual odors, even gases. Some suggested her body had become a kind of chemical chamber, releasing toxic byproducts as her organs failed. Another theory speculated that she may have used dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO, a solvent once touted as a home remedy for pain. DMSO, when metabolized, can theoretically break down into dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic compound that could explain the staff's collapse. But these theories remain unproven. the evidence was fragmentary, the testing inconclusive. Some scientists argue that the conversion of DMSO into dimethyl sulfate within the human body is chemically implausible. Others maintain it is possible under extreme conditions, and that this case may be the only documented instance of such a transformation. Without definitive proof, the debate continues. Speculative interpretations inevitably arose. Some suggested the woman had been exposed to industrial chemicals outside the hospital, her body absorbing and then releasing toxins like a vessel. Others went further, imagining clandestine experiments, hidden contamination, or even government secrecy. Was she merely an unlucky victim of rare chemistry? Or had her death brushed against something larger, something never meant to be revealed? What makes the case haunting is not only the mystery of cause, but the image it leaves behind. A hospital staff undone not by disease, but by the very body of the patient they were trying to save. The toxic lady story lingers in the imagination because it feels like a reversal of natural order. The healer becomes the harmed, the sick body becomes the source of danger. Even today, the case is studied in medical schools and forensic science courses, not as a solved puzzle, but as an unresolved one. Some cite it as a cautionary tale about chemical exposure in unexpected forms. Others use it as an example of how panic and perception can magnify real but unexplained events. And still, a sense of unease remains. Standing in a hospital corridor at night, with the smell of antiseptic thick in the air and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, one can almost imagine the scene. The sudden odor, the first nurse collapsing, the panic spreading as others gasped for breath. What was in the air that night? Was it in her blood, her breath, her skin? Or was the true mystery not chemical at all, but psychological, an unseen contagion of fear that proved just as deadly? The toxic lady case forces us to ask unsettling questions. How much do we really know about the interactions between the human body and the chemicals we ingest, whether prescribed or improvised? Could there be rare, hidden processes within us capable of producing toxic transformations? Or was this incident less about chemistry and more about human perception, the mind's power to create reality from fear? No matter the explanation, the mystery endures. The woman who entered that New York ER has long since passed, but her story remains alive, haunting both medical science and urban legend alike. And as the memory of that night lingers, we are left to wonder, what truly poisoned those who tried to help her? Was she an anomaly of chemistry, a victim of secrecy, or a reminder that even in the most controlled of places, the unknown can still intrude? From the sterile wards of a hospital, where a woman's very body became a mystery, we shift now to the gleaming display cases of Fifth Avenue, a place where wealth and beauty are showcased under glass, yet even here, the unexplained finds a foothold. Tiffany & Company, the world-renowned jeweler, has long been a symbol of elegance in New York City. Its flagship store, with polished counters and glittering gems, projects an aura of security, of treasures carefully guarded against time and theft alike. Yet, amid this bastion of luxury lies one of the city's most enduring enigmas, the tale of a diamond that, some claim, disappeared without explanation. The missing Tiffany diamond. Tiffany's most famous gem, the Tiffany yellow diamond, remains one of the largest of its kind ever discovered. 287 carats in the rough, cut down to a 128-carat cushion of brilliant fire. Its honeyed glow has adorned only a handful of women, including Audrey Hepburn, Lady Gaga, and Beyoncé, each wearing it for carefully staged occasions. But while that diamond is well accounted for, the story of another, less publicized but no less legendary, has been clouded by rumors of disappearance, substitution, and mystery. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Tiffany & Company acquired several extraordinary stones, some rivaling even the yellow diamond in value. Among these was said to be a blue-white diamond of unusual size, a stone whispered about in collectors' circles but rarely seen. Some records suggest it was displayed briefly, then locked away in the company's vaults for safekeeping. And yet, decades later, when inventories were checked, the stone was gone. No announcement, no police reports, just silence. Did the diamond vanish quietly, its loss concealed to avoid scandal? Or did it never exist at all, its story exaggerated into myth by time and rumor? Mainstream explanations lean toward error. Tiffany and Company, like all jewelers, maintained meticulous records. Gems often moved between vaults, showrooms, and private clients. A stone misidentified, sold discreetly, or transferred to a private collection might later appear to have vanished. In an age when sales to elite families were conducted quietly, it is entirely possible the so-called missing diamond left Tiffany's with little fanfare, its fate lost to secrecy rather than crime. But alternative versions of the story persist. Some suggest the stone was stolen, not sold. Jewel heists were hardly unknown in New York's Gilded Era. Skilled thieves targeted both private homes and commercial vaults, and while many were caught, some jobs were executed with such precision that the culprits and the gems were never found. Could the missing Tiffany diamond have slipped out of its vault in such a theft, its absence covered up to preserve the company's reputation? Speculative theories stretch further still. One rumor suggests the diamond was never missing, but replaced, substituted with a lesser stone while the original was smuggled into Europe or Asia. Another insists the gem was cursed, its disappearance deliberate, a quiet burial of an object tied to misfortune. After all, tales of cursed jewels, stones that bring ruin to their owners, were common in the late 19th century, woven into the mystique of gems like the Hope Diamond. Could Tiffany's, fearing scandal, have chosen silence over spectacle? There is also the question of why the story endures. In a city where legends thrive, why has the idea of the missing diamond persisted for over a century? Perhaps because it speaks to a deeper tension, the fragility of security. If even Tiffany's, with its armored vaults and expert guards, could lose something so priceless, what does that say about the permanence of any treasure? Or perhaps the endurance of the story is itself the treasure, a myth that draws us in, sparkling with unanswered questions. Standing before the Tiffany flagship store today, beneath its polished stone facade and glittering window displays, it is difficult to imagine such loss. The guards are vigilant, the cases unbreakable, the vaults fortified. Yet history reminds us that perfection often conceals fragility. Somewhere between record books, rumor, and silence, a diamond may still be unaccounted for. What then became of the missing Tiffany diamond? Was it quietly sold, its story obscured by the discretion of wealth? Was it stolen, carried away into the underworld of illicit gem trading, where stones are recut, renamed, and erased from history? Or was it never missing at all, just a ghost conjured by rumor, an illusion that grew into legend because people wanted to believe even Tiffany's could harbor a secret? The mystery lingers because it refuses to resolve. Unlike a ghost sighting or a creature in the water, this enigma involves an object we know existed, a gem of immense value and beauty. Its absence, or the suggestion of its absence, creates a void, one filled by speculation. Somewhere, perhaps, the stone still lies, glittering in a private collection, its owner unaware, or unwilling to reveal, its origins. And so, the missing Tiffany diamond remains a riddle locked in velvet and shadow. Was it truly lost, or was the loss itself the invention? And if it does still exist, hidden from the world, who holds it now? And why has it never returned to the light? From the glittering vaults of Fifth Avenue, where even diamonds can vanish without a trace, we descend into a very different New York. one of flickering neon signs, flop houses, and narrow, uneven streets. For generations, the Bowery was a place of survival, a district where fortunes ended, where the forgotten gathered. Yet here, too, lies an unsolved enigma. A series of men who disappeared, one after another, their vanishings leaving behind no answers. This is the mystery of the Bowery's vanishing men. The Bowery, stretching through lower Manhattan, has been many things across the centuries. Once a genteel avenue lined with theaters and shops, it fell by the late 19th century into notoriety as New York's Skid Row. Cheap saloons, mission houses, and lodging rooms crowded its blocks, filled with men who had lost their way in the machinery of the city, immigrants, veterans, laborers, drifters. In the 20th century, it became the city's unofficial home for the homeless, a place where anonymity was easy and where disappearances might go unnoticed. Yet, beginning in the late 1800s, newspapers began to note something stranger than poverty or crime: patterns of men vanishing from the Bowery without explanation. Some were last seen leaving lodging houses, others stumbling from saloons late at night. A few were known by name, most by description alone. Their stories shared a grim commonality. They were there, and then they were not. Their absence was not marked by family inquiries or police reports, for many had neither. Instead, it was missionaries, lodging house keepers, and fellow drifters who began to whisper of the Bowery's vanishing men. At first glance, the explanations seem obvious. Life in the Bowery was precarious. Men left suddenly, traveling to seek work, or vanished into the anonymity of the city's underbelly. Disease was rampant. Bodies might be claimed by unmarked graves or absorbed into institutions without documentation. Alcohol and violence claimed many lives, and in a place where records were thin and ties to family weaker still, disappearances could easily become statistics rather than mysteries. But some cases resisted these mundane explanations. Men who were seen nightly in the same taverns, men who lived at the same mission for months, even years, would suddenly vanish, leaving behind all possessions without taking clothing or money. In some instances, multiple disappearances occurred in close succession, creating whispers of something darker at work. Was there someone preying on the forgotten of the Bowery, knowing their absence would not stir police action? Speculative theories spread. Some suggested the missing were victims of shanghaiing, kidnapped to serve as forced labor on ships, smuggled out through the East River docks that lay only a short walk from the Bowery's edge. Others imagined criminal syndicates harvesting the men for illicit labor, or worse. Rumors of body snatching circulated as well, gruesome whispers that hospitals and medical schools might have benefited from an illicit supply of corpses, with the Bowery's vulnerable population providing easy targets. And then there are the darker, stranger theories, those that step beyond the rational. Some residents of the time spoke of shadowy figures luring men down alleys, never to return. Others framed the disappearances as a haunting of the Bowery itself, that the district, soaked in misery and despair, swallowed its own. In a place where hope was so often extinguished, was it any wonder that stories grew of the street itself devouring those who lingered too long? By the mid-20th century, as the Bowery's reputation deepened, the mystery persisted. Journalists occasionally revisited the idea of the vanishing men, pointing to unsolved disappearances of transients even in more modern times. Though the city changed, missions replaced by upscale restaurants, flop houses by luxury apartments, the Bowery's legacy of disappearances has not entirely vanished. Even into the 1980s and 1990s, outreach workers documented missing individuals from the district, their absence often noticed only by other homeless residents. What gives the mystery of the Bowery's vanishing men its enduring power is not merely the fact of disappearance, but the silence that follows. Unlike high-profile missing persons cases, these men left behind little. No photographs, no families campaigning for answers, no possessions to anchor their identities. Their absence becomes haunting not because of what is known, but because of what is unknowable. How many vanished? Were they victims of crime, disease, or neglect? Or was there, hidden within the Bowery's shadowed streets, something more deliberate at work? Today, walking the Bowery feels like stepping into a paradox. High-end boutiques and art galleries gleam beside historic missions and lingering shelters. Yet beneath the transformation lies the weight of memory. The men who once filled its streets, anonymous, forgotten, and too often lost, still cast a shadow. And the questions remain. How many of them truly disappeared into the city's vastness, and how many into something more sinister? The Bowery's vanishing men remind us that mysteries are not always about jewels or monsters, but about lives. Lives so precarious they could be extinguished without trace. Their disappearances may never be solved, their stories never recovered. Yet the whispers endure, reminding us that even in the heart of a city so meticulously documented, there remain silences. Spaces where men slipped from existence, leaving only questions behind. And we are left to wonder, were the Bowery's vanishing men simply casualties of poverty and anonymity? Or do their disappearances hint at a darker truth, one still hidden in the forgotten corners of New York? From the forgotten drifters of the Bowery, whose vanishings left only silence, we move now to a disappearance of a very different kind. One that transcends the boundaries of poverty or neglect and enters the realm of science, genius, and international intrigue. For among the unsolved mysteries whispered about in New York, there lingers the strange rumor that Ettore Majorana, the brilliant Italian physicist who vanished without a trace in 1938, may have resurfaced in this very city, decades after the world declared him gone. Ettore Majorana was no ordinary man. A prodigy of mathematics and physics, he worked alongside Enrico Fermi and contributed to the early study of quantum theory. His ideas were so advanced, so elegant, that even Fermi remarked he was among the few minds he considered equal to Einstein. Yet on March 25, 1938, Majorana boarded a ship from Palermo to Naples, sent letters of farewell to his colleagues, and then disappeared. His body was never found. His fate became one of the great mysteries of modern science. Officially, theories multiplied. Some believed he had taken his own life, overwhelmed by the ethical implications of his research, particularly as Europe slid toward war and the race for nuclear weapons intensified. Others argued he had fled, perhaps into a monastery, seeking refuge in faith, or even into South America, vanishing into anonymity. But among the stranger threads of speculation is one that leads, unexpectedly, to New York City. The rumors began decades after his disappearance, when scattered reports surfaced of a reclusive man living quietly in America, his features resembling Majorana's, his mannerisms unmistakable to those who remembered him. In the 1950s and 1960s, whispers grew stronger. Majorana, some claimed, had resurfaced in New York, working in obscurity, perhaps under an assumed name, avoiding recognition while continuing to pursue his scientific studies. Why New York? Perhaps because, by mid-century, the city had become a hub of scientific advancement. Columbia University and later institutions tied to the Manhattan Project drew some of the world's greatest minds. Fermi himself would eventually work in America. Could Majorana, foreseeing the destructive power of his discoveries, have chosen to disappear into the very city that embodied both the promise and peril of science? Mainstream historians remain cautious. Documentation of Majorana's fate ends in Italy, and the leap to New York relies on rumor, hearsay, and secondhand accounts. It is possible, even likely, that those who reported sightings mistook another man for the long-lost physicist. After all, in a city of millions, resemblance is not rarity. And yet, the New York connection refuses to fade. Some claim that Majorana's knowledge, particularly his theories of neutrinos and matter-antimatter symmetry, was of such potential significance that governments may have had reason to conceal his survival. Did he willingly go underground, aided by secret networks, to prevent his work from being misused? Or was he compelled, hidden away under surveillance, his presence in New York never publicly acknowledged? Speculative theories grow stranger still. A few suggest that Majorana foresaw the full arc of 20th century nuclear history, and that his disappearance was deliberate, an ethical refusal to participate in the building of weapons of mass destruction. In this view, New York becomes both symbolic and practical, a city where scientific progress and secrecy coexisted, where a man could blend into obscurity while remaining close enough to watch history unfold. Others see a more mystical dimension. Majorana, they note, was fascinated not only by mathematics, but by the philosophical implications of physics. Did he vanish not by accident or design, but as part of an experiment in disappearance itself, testing whether a man of pure intellect could erase himself from history, stepping into another life as easily as one steps through a door? If so, New York, with its vast crowds, its anonymity, its endless churn of lives, would have been the perfect stage for such an experiment. Walking through certain corners of the city, an old cafe near Columbia, a library where he might have hidden among dusty volumes, a rented room in a Bowery boarding house, one cannot help but imagine him. A quiet man with piercing eyes, scribbling equations in a notebook, paying cash, avoiding attention. How many such men lived and died in New York, unnoticed? And could one of them have been Ettore Majorana? The fascination with Majorana's supposed presence in New York endures because it is both improbable and yet strangely possible. A man of such brilliance, vanishing in Italy at the cusp of war, might indeed have found refuge in the one city vast enough to contain him without notice. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and in the silence speculation thrives. So we are left with questions. Did Ettore Majorana truly perish in 1938, his genius extinguished by despair? Did he retreat to a monastery, a hermitage, a new life in anonymity far from the eyes of history? Or did he, as the whispers in New York suggest, walk these streets in secret, his mind alive with equations, his presence hidden but enduring? The disappearance of Ettore Majorana remains one of science's great enigmas. But here, in New York, it becomes part of the city's own catalog of mysteries. And as with so many of them, we are left with a haunting thought. How many truths remain buried in the city's shadows, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to ask the right questions? From whispers of a vanished physicist, a genius some believe once walked the streets of New York in obscurity, we turn to another disappearance. One not of a person, but of a place. For in a city defined by its towers and hotels, few names resonate with as much grandeur as the Waldorf Astoria. Its gilded halls have hosted presidents, monarchs, and movie stars. Its suites have borne witness to secret deals and whispered scandals. Yet even within this monument of elegance, there lingers a story that unsettles. It is the tale of a hotel room that guests swore existed, until it did not. This is the mystery of the Vanishing Room at the Waldorf. The Waldorf Astoria, originally two rival hotels joined into one, stood first on Fifth Avenue before its demolition made way for the Empire State Building. Its second incarnation, rising in 1931 on Park Avenue, became the embodiment of luxury. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, Art Deco details, all spoke of permanence, stability, and wealth. To stay there was to step into a world where nothing could go awry, and yet, amid the Waldorf's meticulous design and careful order, stories emerged of a room that appeared on reservation books, was checked into by guests, and then disappeared. Accounts vary, but the essential pattern is the same. A traveler arrives at the Waldorf, perhaps exhausted from an overseas voyage or a long train ride. They are assigned a room, sometimes numbered, sometimes not recalled. They spend the night there, or at least part of it. Then, when they later inquire, the room is gone. Staff deny its existence. Records show no such reservation. And in some cases, the very hallway where the room once was seems altered. Doors shifted, walls seamless where once there had been a handle and a lock. At first glance, such tales invite skepticism. Hotels are complex places, with renovations, closures, and renumbering of rooms common across decades. Guests, tired or disoriented, may misremember. A room temporarily closed for maintenance may explain the confusion. Clerical errors in bookings are hardly supernatural. These mainstream explanations seem tidy, rational, yet the strangeness of the accounts resists easy dismissal. Some guests insisted on their memories with startling detail: the pattern of wallpaper, the placement of a writing desk, the sound of traffic through the window. Others claimed they returned hours later to find the hallway subtly changed, as though the architecture itself had shifted. Could fatigue or imagination truly account for such consistency? Speculative theories began to emerge. Some whispered that the Waldorf maintained hidden rooms for VIPs, spaces off the official grid, created for discretion. A foreign dignitary, a politician, or a celebrity might require privacy, and the hotel, in its desire to protect reputations, could have manipulated records and access. Did a guest stumble accidentally into one of these hidden suites, only to find it erased once the occupant had departed? Others pushed the idea further. Hotels, after all, are liminal spaces, places of constant turnover, anonymity, and impermanence. Might the Vanishing Room be an urban echo of older European legends of disappearing hotel rooms, stories where travelers found themselves in rooms that seemed ordinary, until they awoke to find both the room and its staff denying they had ever been there? Such tales often intertwine with time slips, suggesting that the guest has brushed against another era, another reality, momentarily bleeding into our own. Could the Waldorf's mystery be part of this wider tapestry of folklore? There are also darker interpretations. Some suggest the Vanishing Room is tied to crime or scandal, an illicit death, perhaps, or a disappearance that the hotel quietly concealed to preserve its reputation. If so, then the erasure of the room from records would be deliberate, an attempt to bury the evidence behind plaster and paint in a hotel where power and secrecy mingled nightly. Is it so impossible to imagine? Walking the halls of the Waldorf today, now undergoing renovations and transformation into luxury residences, one can sense the layers of history pressing close. The carpets soften each step, the walls gleam with restored polish, and yet, beneath it all, there is the faint echo of the uncanny. Every door looks the same, every corridor carefully aligned, but the mind cannot help but wonder, could one of these doors once have led to a room that no longer exists, or perhaps exists only when needed? The fascination with the Vanishing Room persists because it unsettles our assumptions of permanence. Buildings, unlike people, seem fixed, anchored. Yet here, the architecture itself appears fluid, as if the Waldorf were capable of hiding or revealing parts of itself at will. If even walls and doors can betray us, what certainty remains? And so we are left with the lingering enigma. Was the Vanishing Room a trick of memory, a quirk of renovation, a clerical error magnet, ified by rumor? Or was it something stranger, a concealed suite, a buried scandal, or even a slip in time itself? The Waldorf stands as one of New York's most iconic landmarks, its grandeur beyond question. But in the shadows of its elegance, we are reminded that even the most solid of structures may harbor mysteries. And as we consider the tale of the room that appeared and disappeared, we cannot help but wonder, what other secrets do the walls of New York's grandest hotels keep, waiting silently? hidden in the architecture of memory. From the gilded corridors of the Waldorf, where rumors tell of a room that appeared and vanished as though swallowed by the building itself, we step out into the city streets, where mysteries sometimes hide, not in opulence, but in the very pavement beneath our feet. On a quiet corner of Greenwich Village lies one of New York's smallest plots of land, no larger than a doormat, yet it has defied the city's grasp for over a century. This strange little triangle, embedded with a mosaic that reads, "Property of the Hess estate, which has never been dedicated for public purposes," has puzzled residents and visitors alike. What is the Hess Triangle? And why does it still whisper of resistance, secrecy, and unresolved defiance? At first glance, the Hess Triangle seems insignificant. It measures just 25 inches on each side, a sliver of sidewalk easily missed by passers-by. But to those who stop, it holds an uncanny gravity. The triangle sits flush with the pavement, its mosaic letters worn by decades of footsteps, a relic of another era embedded in the flow of modern life. It is, by all appearances, a tiny piece of private land defiantly set against the encroaching city. The story begins in the early 20th century, when New York launched one of its most ambitious urban planning projects, the expansion of 7th Avenue and the construction of the subway lines beneath it. To make way for progress, entire blocks were demolished. Among the properties claimed by eminent domain was the Voorhees, a 5-story apartment building owned by David Hess. The building was razed, its tenants displaced, and the land absorbed into the widening avenue, or so the city believed. In the legal and architectural reshuffling, however, a mistake, or perhaps a deliberate oversight, was made. A tiny triangular fragment of the Hess property, too small to be useful, was left out of the seizure. Just 500 square inches of land, it remained technically private property, unclaimed by the city. Rather than surrender it, the Hess family chose to mark it. In 1922, they installed the mosaic that still exists today, a permanent reminder of their refusal to dedicate the land to public use. Mainstream explanations view the Hess Triangle as a curious but straightforward legal oddity, a remnant of paperwork, a quirk of eminent domain. In this telling, it is a symbol of stubbornness, a final protest against the machinery of urban progress. The family could have ignored it, but instead, they chose to enshrine their defiance in tile and mortar, leaving behind a puzzle for future generations. But as with so many of New York's stories, speculation grows around the gaps. Why, some wonder, did the Hess family invest in creating such a conspicuous marker? Was it merely pride, or did the triangle hold some deeper significance? There are whispers that the triangle, though tiny, was leveraged in legal disputes far beyond its size, used as a loophole, a bargaining chip in negotiations the city preferred to keep quiet. Others suggest symbolic weight. The placement of the triangle at the meeting point of shifting streets feels intentional. Could the Hess family have meant it not only as a protest, but as a kind of talisman, an enduring reminder that even in a city of steel and stone, individual defiance could survive? To this day, the triangle remains one of the smallest plots of private land in Manhattan, its ownership shifting hands but its message unchanged. Speculative theories wander further still. Some claim the Hess Triangle has been tied to secret societies, that its shape and inscription serve as a marker recognizable only to the initiated. Triangles, after all, carry heavy symbolic weight in religion, in mysticism, in architecture. Was this sliver of sidewalk meant to be more than a property dispute? Could it have been a hidden signal, a signpost embedded within the city's grid? Others interpret the triangle almost as an urban legend in itself, a space where the city's relentless drive for expansion faltered. In this reading, the Hess Triangle is less a legal oddity than a crack in the facade of progress, a reminder that New York, for all its power, is not invincible. Even the smallest resistance can endure, quietly mocking the very system that sought to erase it. Standing at the site today, amid the bustle of Greenwich Village, one feels an odd sense of displacement. The triangle is absurdly small, yet its presence is outsized. Tourists photograph it, locals nod to it, and some simply walk over it, unaware of the history beneath their feet. And still the words remain, their defiance undimmed, never dedicated for public purposes. What lingers in the imagination is not just the triangle's survival, but its mystery. Was it truly nothing more than the product of paperwork and pride? Or does it conceal a story never fully told? Did David Hess intend only to preserve a family's dignity, or did he leave behind something stranger, an enduring riddle set into the very pavement of the city? The Hess Triangle reminds us that not all mysteries tower above us. Some lie flat, hidden in plain sight, stepped on by thousands each day. And as we pause over its tiny mosaic, we cannot help but ask, is this little wedge of sidewalk merely a footnote in urban planning, or is it one of New York's most eloquent secrets, quietly mocking us from the ground below?